aren't we? What's the point in wasting time to row to your own ship when we are already on mine own ship? Theon replied. Theon glanced at Davin Lannister, whom scratched an anxious itch in his trimmed golden beard. It might make more sense, Lord Redwyne, if we were to plan here, for we are already aboard Lord Greyjoy's ship, he said diplomatically. I have been sailing for longer than you've been alive, Grey boy. Whilst I was commanding the Uber's fleet, you were still on your mother's tits, and running from Pike when your uncle slaughtered your family. A pity he couldn't finish the job. Theon turned to him with a dark anger. Theon walked towards Redwyne, when his relative, whom announced his arrival, unsheathed his sword. Theon grabbed him by his wrist and twisted it until he screamed before kneeing him in the groin. The Redwyne fool screamed as his sword fell to the hull. Theon then grabbed him the skin of the back of his neck and slammed his face onto the balustrade. He groaned as he fell on his side, blood pouring from his face, whilst Theon scowled as he looked up at Paxter Redwyne, whom stared in shock at the display. And whilst your only experience of war has been blockading Storm's End and starving women and children, I have been killing pirates since I was 12 and captaining my first ship at 14 and killing pirates, reavers, raiders and slavers since then. I fucking slew Oren Waters and claimed his Valyrian steel sword. I wiped out the pirates of the Stepstones. I slaughtered the Sisterman Sea Raiders and Tiroshi slavers of Titan's Tower. All on the king's command. And where was the great fleet of House Redwyne when I was doing all of the king's bidding at the Stepstones and at Titan's Tower? Doing fucking nothing, but whoring and getting drunk in idleness on their lord's command. Theon stood straight whilst one of Paxter Redwyne's sons helped up his uncle, whom Theon overheard him call Desmond. Now, does anyone else want to question my experience or my loyalty to the king? Theon demanded with a ferocious glare at the stupid mainlanders. He remembered the last time that he felt this anger was when he slew Andric the Unsmiling. And like then, none dared to challenge or oppose him. He glanced at Uncle Roderick and Asher, whom smirked at this display. Asher winked at him. We meet in my cabin in 5 minutes. In the meantime, send Sir Desmond to Maester Rissel. He gestured to the ship's maester, whom had apprenticed for 5 years under Maester Wendomer before Theon decided to keep him aboard the Iron Kraken on account of the many wounds and injuries Theon sustained from fighting and sailing. Paxter Redwyne's sons took their uncle Desmond to Maester Rissel whilst Theon walked to his cabin. Davin Lannister walked to Theon. My Lord Greyjoy. Theon turned to him, just as Uncle Roderick patted him on the back, trying to calm him down. I think that was uncalled for, he said. He should be grateful. The last 2 guests of mine whom insulted me and looked down on me, I killed them both in duels. If he is so offended, he can sail home for the comforts of the Uber and his beautiful lady wife, only to be called a coward and a traitor when he does so and when the war ends. I am deserving of this command, Sir Davin. I've been sailing since I was 7 and have personally captured over 100 pirate vessels. I've killed pirates, sea raiders and slavers in the thousands since I was 12. The only thing he can boast of is being Lord of the Uber, for I would not call the starving of Storm's End a noteworthy achievement. Would you? Theon snapped. Rob 8. At White Walls, the 3 armies were camped, awaiting the arrival of the king and what was left of his army. In Father's pavilion, the lords gathered for Father's planning on the war. Because Father had fought more than either Uncle Edmure or Uncle Elbert, it was to him that the Northern Lords, the Vale Lords and the River Lords looked to for leadership in the war against the Black Fires. Ever since the news of the Battle of Duskendale and the sack of Duskendale, fear and panic gripped the small folk of the Riverlands and the combined armies. Rob had heard plenty of the rumors from passing soldiers and small folk wherever he walked in the army. Tales were told of Blackfyr's fighting prowess, of his unmatched skill, his bloodlust for the innocent. That his claim was true. That the atrocities committed were divine punishment sent because of the Targaryens. And that it was the wrath of the Seven for a northern tree-worshipping savage being queen. Rob's focus was not on the House Dare scouts giving Father their report on the Blackfyr army. Nor on the gathered bannermen listening to the scouts and Father's reply. Or on Father planning their response. Or his brothers and sister, nervously watching Father. And not on his closest friends of houses Blackwood, Carstark, Umber, Mormont, Bolton, Dustin, Ryswell. His focus was on his great sword. If Sansa were not wed to Aegon, we wouldn't be here, would we? Or would father have not given a damn about the South over how they treated us in years past? I have seen enough war and death. The Southerners can boast of all they did in this war years from now and say that this war was the greatest ever fought in Westeros. But I will always know that the greatest and most important war ever fought in the Seven Kingdoms, was the War of the Long Night. It was a war that all kingdoms should have fought in. But only the North fought it. And then Robb thought to Jane and to their children. I should be back home, with Jane and our children. Instead, I am here because one man thinks that his claim to the Iron Throne is more important than the lives of thousands of small folk and soldiers. Since when was the Game of Thrones more important than the lives of others? Lord Stark, the king is here, with what remains of his army. Robb looked at hearing Benfred's news. Robb stood up from his seat, followed by all lords and their sons and daughters of the North, the Riverlands and the Vale. As well as the remnants of the royal army, they were soon to be joined by the Dornish army and the Stormlands army, commanded by Stannis Baratheon and Oberyn Martell. With our numbers combined, we would number at least 70,000 men. If not 80,000. Blackfyr's numbers cannot exceed more than those. But we cannot be taken by surprise again as they had been at Duskendale. All stood as Aegon entered father's tent, followed by his Kingsguard, Tywin Lannister, Mace Tyrell and their principal bannerman. Your Grace, thank the gods you are come, said Uncle Elbert. I am here, Lord Arryn, but so is the enemy which has invaded our fair shores and so brutally sacked fair Duskendale. Putting over 50,000 small folk to the sword, said Aegon. Such atrocities will only fuel the fire in the hearts and swords of the men gathered to fight for their country and their king, Your Grace, said father. Of this, I have no doubt, Lord Stark. Now, what news is there from my Uncle Oberyn, he asked. Father turned to Uncle Ed Muir. Prince Oberyn and Lord Baratheon's armies shall be here in 2 days' time, my king, he replied. And what of Blackfyr? Where is he? Asked Tywin Lannister. He remains at Duskendale, Your Grace. And Euron Greyjoy has been using its port to ship supplies and reinforcements from Essos, said Nestor Royce. Do we know how many men he has? Asked Lord Commander Hightower of the Kingsguard. They have 80,000 men, the last our scouts discovered, Lord Commander. But that was a week ago. There could be more, said Raymond Arry. A great number of our men lie dead at Duskendale. As well as tens of thousands of small folk. The longer we leave this unanswered, my lords, the longer Blackfyr shall destabilize my reign and the stability of the kingdoms before he marched on King's Landing, whilst his Dothraki, his sellswords and his treacherous Greyjoy allies put innocents to the sword and torch, said Aegon. But during his speech, Robb looked down at the map of the borderlands between the Crownlands and the Riverlands. He remembered going to these lands when he was warding with Grandfather Hoster and Uncle Ed Muir at Riverrun. He remembered, in particular, a place that he felt could turn the tide of the war. King's Valley. Where Tristan Mudford defeated and captured Roland Arryn too. Your Grace, I have a plan, a good plan. They all turned to Robb. With respect, Lord Robb, you do not know war as I do. Lord Tyrell, your only time at war was fighting Robert Baratheon at Ashford and starving Storm's End for a year whilst a war was being fought in the Riverlands. I have fought wilderling raiders dozens of times growing up, and at the war at the Wall, I led men into battle and never lost once. All in the tent went silent at Robb's outspokenness towards the Lord of Highgarden. Your plan, Lord Robb, what is it? Asked Aegon, hoping to silence Mace Tyrell, whom had grown as red as the rubies on Aegon's breastplate. We leave the camp tonight, and move towards King's Valley as soon as possible, said Robb, pointing at the valley in question on the map. Before leaving, we send word to your Uncle Oberyn to harass the Blackfyr army and lure them towards us there. And then we can lure them into a trap. The lands there are such that an army trapped on all sides will fall, no matter their numbers, Robb explained. Describe the lands of King's Valley, said Tywin Lannister. They are such, Lord Lannister, just as Lord Robb has said. Perfect grounds to hide an army and to spring a trap. The woods can mask archers and the hills are excellent vantage points for both archers and for cavalry to charge down on an unprepared enemy, said Raymond Arry. Aegon looked around at the nobility gathered in the pavilion. Robb looked to father, whom nodded with approval. What say you, my lords? Asked Aegon. Your Grace, if I may, asked Mace Tyrell. Robb rolled his eyes at the man, whom father had spoken plenty of from his time in King's Landing and for starving Storm's End. Yes, Lord Tyrell. This plan is ill-conceived and dangerous. And there is no guarantee that the Black Fyress will fall for such a deception, he said. I think it's rather clever. Robb looked up at Tywin Lannister, whom voiced it. As do I, my king, said Randyll Tarly. Chapter 47, On the Eve of Battle. Chapter text. Trys 15. It's too comfortable for my liking. Trys climbed out of his bed. The last time he had spent in a comfortable bed with silk sheets and goose-feather pillows was when he last lived in his childhood home of the Black Pyramids in Lies. He had spent a lifetime in rough bedrolls in tents and on board ships as a squire of the Golden Company, then as a soldier, a knight, an officer, and then as captain. Discipline was what drove him to sleep in such beds when he was in the Golden Company, and rough beds reinforced him in said belief. But sleeping in comfortable beds were too easy and too relaxing for Trys. From Braavos to Volantis, from the Dothraki waste to the lands of the long summer, Trys had spent his life in bedrolls in tents, pavilions and ships. But rarely had he slept in a silk sheets bed. There were times he would even bring a bedroll with him when sleeping inside a palace or a manse. But not now when they were in Duskendale and Trys slept in the Dun Fort, in the bedchambers of Lord Renfred Ryker. Trys had found a strange comfort in the bedsheets of Redfred Ryker. This almost makes me wonder what will the king's bedchambers in the Red Keep shall be like. Trys yawned as he climbed out of his bed and wiped his eyes before drinking wine from his bedside table. Your Grace. Trys turned around to see Lysander. It hadn't escaped Trys' notice however since the victory against Aegon Targaryen and the sacking of the city, all addressed him as Your Grace or as my king. It is with my victory against the Targaryen boy that they believe in me and that I will lead them to victory against Aegon Targaryen. The fools should always have believed in me. I have never lost a battle or a war. And I will not lose the next battles or this war. Yes. The Targaryen boy has led what is left of his armies into the Riverlands. He has joined with the Starks, Tullys and Arryns, he said. Combining two armies into one. Even better. But where are the Martells and the Baratheons? How many do they number? Asked Trys, as he drank his wine and the food tray left by Dagon. 70,000 he replied. Only that? Asked Trys. After Duskendale, thousands died of their wounds, were sent home or are still being treated in the Riverlands, he explained. Trys hummed as he ate a slice of bread. And the Martells and Baratheons? Where are they? Oberyn Martell is the one to fear. He has experience as a former commander of the Second Sons. Back when they were a reputable and brilliant sellsword army, before Mero destroyed their reputation and they descended into disrepute. Numbering 20,000. They marched to join them at the borders between the Riverlands and the Crown Lands. This cannot be. 3 armies joining into one. This is perfect. All it takes is one more victory, and then I can march on King's Landing, and I will at least be king. When does the next squadron from Lies arrive? He asked as he picked up a boiled egg from his platter. The day after tomorrow, Your Grace. Shall we wait for them or march ahead? No. We wait. We will give them plenty of time to link up their armies. And then, we will strike and crush them all in a single and decisive blow, Trys explained before smashing his egg on the platter, cracking the shell open and tearing the boiled egg out. Lucas 6. We're here, whispered Sir Florian Mouton. Lucas looked around the wooded hill. Sir Florian, how certain are you that the Black Fyress won't spot us here? Asked Lucas. So long as we are quiet, Sir Lucas, they will not, he replied. The heir to Maidenpool was confident in his knowledge of the area. Lucas was glad of it. He shivered at the thought of what terrible fate had befallen Duskendale. Never again. What happened at Duskendale will never happen again. Lucas and Asher had been entrusted by Aegon to scout at all positions in King's Valley after Robb suggested it. Florian Mouton and Lumandiari had acted as their guides for the valley where the great warrior and hero of the First Men and the Riverlands, Tristan Mudford, defeated and captured Roland Arryn II. Lucas walked through the wooded hill once more with Sir Florian before they reached the edge. What say you, sir? Asked Sir Florian. Lucas turned around to face him. He smiled at the heir at Maidenpool. It's perfect. Let's see if Deari and Forrester have had the same luck, said Lucas. They returned to the clearing, where they knew the battle would take place. Already there were Asher and Liman Deari, both sharing a swig of wine from Asher's waterskin. How have you fared? Lucas asked as he drank from his own waterskin. We've done good. Found 4 potential spots for archers and for infantry, replied Asher. Whom would have thought that my times from playing in this valley as a child would have all been of such importance in this war? Liman Deari wondered aloud. Thank the gods, new and old, that you did. The Black Fires deserve a devastating defeat and a fate worse than death for everything they did to Duskendale and its people, said Florian. Come now, sirs. We must get back to the king, said Lucas. They followed him back to their horses and began to ride back to Southhorn, where the army was camped. Will Blackfyr care for Southhorn? Wondered Liman. Not at the moment, said Asher. What do you mean? Will he or won't he, Sir Asher? Asked Liman. What he means, Sir Liman, is that for now he won't focus on the castle, for it is just another castle for him. But, should he succeed in defeating us at King's Valley, the aftermath would affect all of Southhorn and its people, just as it did after the Battle of Duskendale, Lucas explained. The cruel bastard likely sacked it as a reward for his army after winning the battle. Evil bastard. I hope the old gods have a special place in the 7 hells, just for him. Lucas snarled in disgust as he remembered hearing of what happened at Duskendale on the journey to Rosby after the battle. At Egon's pavilion outside of the castle, they informed Egon of the valley, and with a map drawn by locals, they pointed out all the best locations to spring the trap. Excellent work. Now we can have revenge on the Black Fires, said Egon. What happens now, your grace? Asked Mace Tyrell. Now, my lord Tyrell. Everything hinges on my uncle Oberyn. Chapter 48, Remember Duskendale. Chapter text. Interlude 13. Lord Royce is an underrated character in the show. Definitely one of the bright spots of the later seasons IMO, /Game of Thrones. Yohn Royce, Rupert Vansittart. Father, there are the Dothraki, Robar said eagerly. And the Blackfyr vanguard won't be far behind, Yohn added before Ander mustered for their knights to follow him. The king had given him the command of the Knights of the Vale to charge into the Blackfyr army once they had been led into the fray by the Dornish cavalry. And Yohn had no intention of failing in his duty to the king. He had sworn an oath to the king on the day that he was crowned, and he was intent on following his orders to the very end, as honor dictated as Lord of Runestone and as a Knight of the Vale. Yohn took his lance from his squire, Roland Coldwater, the youngest son of Royce Coldwater. Sheathed at his side was Lamentation, the once long-lost sword of House Royce before it was recovered in the Dragon Pit of King's Landing by Vale soldiers during the search for Wildfire and the hunt for the alchemists whom tried to have them burn and destroy the capital. Yohn looked down at Prince Oberyn Martell, whom was holding a bow up and shooting a Dothraki down from his saddle. He shouted and taunted the Dothraki in their own tongue and with a laugh before he rode towards the clearing. The plan was brilliant, father. Robb Stark planned this better than Tywin Lannister or Randyll Tarly ever could have, Ander admired. Indeed. The young wolf is a great warrior and a fine tactician. Though if there were more battles in this war to be fought, I have no doubt that Robb Stark could have showed off his brilliant mind for war for all the world to see, said Yohn. The plan had been for scouts to trick the Blackfyrs into thinking they were yet to arrive at King's Valley, but after the Baratheon army broke from the Dornish to march for King's Valley, the Dornish army rode to lure the Blackfyrs into Robb Stark's trap, awaiting them in King's Valley. And now, from behind copses, hills and woods, the allied army was ready to ambush the Blackfyr army. The Blackfyr army, sellsword and Dothraki alike, were charging towards the Dornish. And just as the Dornish cavalry were seemingly trapped in the clearing, Prince Oberyn lifted high his war horn. He blew it ferociously before lifting his spear up high. At that, Yohn lifted his lance up. As high as honor. As high as honor, was roared by all knights of the Vale, including Yohn's own sons. Yohn was the first to charge, seeing the rear of the Dothraki horde and deciding to charge straight for them. The barbaric scum has defiled the Crown Lands and will do the same to the Riverlands and to King's Landing, given the chance. But so long as I live, they will not. The Dothraki turned in shock at the charge of the Knights of the Vale. Yohn held his shield up when he saw a few knock arrows to their bows. Barbarians they may be, but their skills on horseback and with bows is famous across the known world. Only one arrow struck at his shield before he came within a stone's throw of the Dothraki. Yon's lance impaled a Dothraki bloodrider as he drew an arrow to face Yon. He threw down his broken lance and he unsheathed Lamentation, its grey blade glimmering in the sunlight as he swung the great sword. Yon sliced it across a Dothraki screamer as he hooted whilst wielding an arrow. The blow sliced him in half at the belly button. Yon stabbed another as he tried to cut down onto the Lord of Runestone. As he withdrew Lamentation from his corpse, he turned to see a Dothraki shouting orders. That must be Khal Rakaro. Your men have caused no small amount of suffering to innocent peoples from Cracklaw Point to Sow's Horn. That ends today. Yon eviscerated another from his shoulder to his belly before beheading another on his way towards Khal Rakaro. He rode a mighty white stallion, with scars of swords and arrows on its body, the same as its rider. The Khal's hair was braided a few times, signifying his victories on the battlefield. I'll take off your head and your braids for all the evil you have done, Yon thought as he stabbed a foolish Dothraki trying to cut at him. The Khal looked around in surprise at the sound of more war horns and more armies joining the battle in the valley. It's over, Dothraki scum, Blackfyr cowards. You have lost this war. And your lives, Yon thought with a grin as he killed the last Dothraki standing in his way between he and Khal Rakaro. Khal Rakaro turned to Yon. He spoke angrily in Dothraki at him, pointing his blooded arrow at him. Yon blocked his swing with Lamentation. But before he could try and slice Lamentation at him, the Dothraki Khal was already swiftly swinging at him. He is skilled, Yon conceded. But he uses his advantage of speed from wearing only Dothraki furs rather than chainmail and armor as we wear. But Yon decided to use his own armor to his advantage. Yon blocked the next few swings before he parried the arrow aside. And with a hard punch to his face, Khal Rakaro fell from his horse, bleeding from his face from the armored fist striking him. Yon climbed down from his horse and walked towards Khal Rakaro. He swung his arrow at Yon, determined to keep fighting. But Yon sidestepped out of the way and proceeded to behead him. Asher 6. The battle was going well, Asher could see as he rode at Aegon's side, killing a second son's horseman as he rode alongside Sir Oswyl. The defeat of the Dothraki at the hands of the mighty Knights of the Vale and the crushing of the Blackfyr vanguard by the combined might of the Northern and Stormlands army. Your Grace, asked a tired Lord Commander Hightower, whom had slit the throat of a Golden Company footman. In spite of his aging in his 60s, Asher admired the White Bull and how bravely he fought in battle against the enemy. Press on. Signal all infantry to enclose the flanks and crush the Blackfyr army, Aegon commanded. Yes, Your Grace, said Montoris Valerian before he grabbed his war horn. The sound which came out was weak. He put it to one side before spitting and licking his lips. He placed it back to his lips and blew hard on the war horn. This time, all heard the sound of the Targaryen war horn. Reserves from the Crown Lands, Reach and Westerlands, veterans of Duskendale, charged onto the blooded field, screaming for vengeance for Duskendale. Lifting high Dark Sister, Aegon shouted for his royal force to hear. Remember Duskendale. Never again. Throw the Blackfyres from Westeros forever. Never again, was shouted by all gathered under the king's banner. No mercy to the Blackfyr scum. Asher roared as he lifted his sword and axe up high. Alongside Aegon, Asher rode towards the Blackfyr's flank. Under Robb Stark's suggestion, they had left that deliberately open to fool the Blackfyres into thinking that it was their only means of escape. But upon closing it, they would have no escape, just as many would try to do just that. For a trapped enemy will fight like a hunted boar when pressed on all sides, explained Sir Lyle. Asher carved sword and axe both on 2 footmen and infantry of the Blackfyr army. He stabbed a spearman as he tried to impale his horse. He carved his axe onto the skull of a Golden Company knight as he rode towards Aegon. Then he kicked an infantryman hard in the face when he ran towards Asher. The kick knocked him onto his back, only to be trampled on by his comrades. As Asher eviscerated a Storakrau's horseman, he looked around for their enemy. Where is Blackfyr? And soon, he saw him. He spotted Blackfyr from his blood-red steel plate armor and him killing with ease with his Valyrian steel sword. But when he saw just how he fought, Asher shivered. Sir Drold, Sir Barristan and Sir Arthur would struggle against him. He is a warrior like none we have ever seen. Asher stabbed another Golden Company soldier before he heard a groan from his right. He turned to the king. The king was groaning at being cut by an enemy spear on his arm. Asher carved down the spearman whom dared to strike at the king. "Protect the king! Protect the king!" cried Sir Oswell. Asher climbed down from his horse and kicked another enemy soldier just before his feet touched the ground. He lifted high his sword and axe and blocked a charging sellsword. Asher parried his next attack before burying his axe into his hip. As he screamed, Asher stabbed him in the mouth, thrusting further until his sword impaled into his brains. Asher turned to see the king still being safely surrounded by Lord Commander Hightower, Sir Arthur, Sir Alisa, Sir Lyle and Sir Oswell. Lucas had done the same and climbed down from his horse to join the fighting against the Black Fear infantry that were running for the king. "You will not have him. Never. Not whilst I stand." Asher roared for them all to hear before he clashed with them, cutting down half a dozen infantry as they ran towards the king. A few sellswords ran towards Asher. Asher ducked up the large swing of a two-handed arrow of one, and proceeded to slice at his head before he stood straight again. The swing cut the sellsword's throat. The other two attacked Asher. Asher buried his axe into the skull of one before he stabbed the other in the face. Asher groaned as he pulled both axe and sword from the two dead sellswords. He stood straight to see the king was safely guarded by a ring of soldiers on the ground. Asher ran back to his horse alongside Lucas, whom was blooded from killing two additional sellswords. Rob 9. The Titan's bastard, indeed, Rob thought as he clashed his sword against the arrow of the captain of the Second Sons. The sellsword was neither skilled nor courageous, Rob could see, from how he held his arrow and how he fought. He swung desperately at Rob, hoping to catch him off guard. But Rob dodged his swing and proceeded to stab him. He groaned as he dropped his arrow and his eyes rolled. Rob pulled his sword out, the corpse falling to the bloody grass before Rob looked up and around for another opponent to fight. He sliced his great sword onto the head of a soldier, splitting his skull open from the top to his chin. Then he eviscerated another from one side of his belly to the other. He drew his dagger and threw it another running at him. Rob roared as he swung his great sword at the legs of another, chopping just one leg off. As he screamed, Rob finished him off with a powerful stomp on his neck, hearing a sickening breaking of bones. Next, he turned to two more soldiers. Rob sliced one in half at the hips before turning to the other. He cut him down from his throat to his groin. Another charged at him, wielding a sword and shield. Rob sliced his great sword around, cutting at his knees. The swordsman screamed as he dropped his sword and shield. Rob beheaded him before turning to another, roaring as he charged at Rob. Rob charged towards him, impaling him through his chest with his great sword. Rob panted as he pulled his great sword out of the man's chest as he dropped his axe and shield onto the blooded grass. Rob came at a large man with an axe, whom swung his axe down onto Rob. In spite of blocking the blow, Rob's sword fell from his grasp. Rob reached for the axeman and grabbed him by his neck. He tried to breathe calmly as he broke the man's neck. Rob looked down and grabbed his great sword as another ran towards him. Rob ducked underneath his blow before stabbing him. He quickly pulled his sword out before slicing at another's belly. He finished him off by beheading him as he groaned and watched his own guts fall to the grass like a family of conjoined snakes. Rob carved his great sword down onto a Golden Company knight as he tried to backstab Harry on. He split another's belly open before stabbing a third man as he tried to stab Rob. Rob leant on his sword as he tried to breathe, now exhausted from the fighting and feeling blood splatter and sweat spill onto his face and onto his neck. Rob turned around when he saw a Golden Company officer riding towards him, lance in hand. Rob roared at the top of his voice as he lifted high his great sword. Rob cut across at the man's lance. He cut the lance down from his grasp and cut at the reins of his horse. The horse neighed furiously and stood on its rear legs. With no reins to hold on to, the officer fell from the saddle and onto the ground. Rob roared as he ran towards him, great sword in hand. The officer drew his sword and sliced at Rob desperately. Rob beheaded him before his blow could cut at his neck. Rob raised his sword up high as he turned around, hearing another ride towards him. He roared as he lifted his great sword. But calmed when he recognized whom it was. Sir Jaime Lannister, heir to Casterly Rock. "Calm yourself, young Stark. You fight well," he complimented with blood on his sword and his Lannister armor. Robb merely nodded before looking around at the battlefield. Have we done it? Is the day ours? Where is Black Fear, Sir Jaime? Robb asked. Fled. Saw him kill over 20 men to create a gap so that he and what's left of his army could escape, he replied. Robb panted as he took the news in. Though the cunt lives, we have won. And killed so many of his army. Robb turned to the top of the hill from whence they had first come. He saw Aegon, sat on his armored horse. Though the blood was visible on his armor, his sword and his horse, showing that he had indeed been fighting against the enemy. He lifted Dark Sister up high for the army to see. A great victory, lads, he roared. Robb was the first to roar and cheer in reply as he lifted his great sword. Chapter 49, The Looming Final Battle. Chapter Text. Elia 13. Mother. I know you have your dislikes for House Tyrell and for all of its inactions in the rebellion. But I can assure you that I am happy here in Highgarden. Willers is so kind and caring towards me and never boasts of his honor or his skill with a sword and lance as most knights and young noble boys do. And I wanted to be the first to bring you the greatest of news. I am with child. By the time you receive this, I shall be 8 moons away from giving birth. And I hope that you, Aegon and Sansa can come to Highgarden to meet my first child and for us to meet Aegon's first child. Yours sincerely, Rhaenys. My little girl, soon to be a mother. And my darling boy, soon to be a father, Elia thought as she smiled, putting the letter down. But, as she did so, she remembered the last news of Aegon from the war front. That they were preparing to lure the Black Fear army into a place called King's Valley in the borderlands between the Crownlands and the Riverlands. Elia looked up when she heard knocking on the door of her solar. Yes, she asked. Your Grace, you are summoned by the Queen to the throne room, said Sir Barristan. Do you know why, Sir Barristan? She asked. Sir Lancel Lannister returns with news from the war, Your Grace, he replied. Gods. I hope that this is good news. Elia walked with Sir Barristan to the throne room. Elia stood with Rollo and Jon beside the Iron Throne whilst Sansa sat down on the uncomfortable and ugly throne. All eyes were on the eldest son of Sir Kevan Lannister, the more pleasant and kindly brother of Tywin Lannister. My queen, I bring most joyous news, he announced. Speak, Sir Lancel, said Sansa. His Grace prevailed at the fighting at King's Valley. The Black Fear army was routed and the enemy has lost more than half his army, he declared. Joyous news, indeed, Elia thought as she exhaled with relief. At the news of the victorious battle, there was noise of clapping and cheering loud throughout the entire throne room. Thank the Seven, Elia thought with gratitude for the gods, especially for the Another and the warrior for safely guiding Aegon. But whilst all were ecstatic at the news, only Sansa remained calm and focused on the messenger. And what of Black Fear, Sir Lancel? Is he dead? She asked soon after Uncle Luwin called for silence. He is not, my queen. He leads the remnants of his army, some 40,000, back inside the Crown Lands. His Grace gives chase after them with all armies combined. Thank you, for bringing this news, Sir Lancel, Sansa said gracefully, standing up. As she stood up, Elia saw how she struggled slightly due to the child inside her protruding from her belly. She shows remarkable strength of character in making these court appearances, even when heavy with child. She is a good queen in the making. Though a great victory has been achieved by the king, and by all our fathers, brothers, sons and friends fighting against Black Fear and his dark and terrible army, it still comes at the cost of many good men. And at the cost of the lives and livelihoods of small folk of the Crownlands and the Riverlands. Even now as I speak, refugees flock to our capital. Which is why, the Queen Mother, the Queen Dowager and I shall be visiting these peoples and lending what aid we can. I ask that all here do the same and show a welcoming hand to all unfortunate souls whom have so suffered for the ambitions of a cruel and evil man such as Triss Black Fear, Sansa announced. Elia beamed with pride at her good daughter for her speech alongside Rollo whilst all in the throne room applauded her speech. A far cry from when they whispered Northern Savage behind her back. It is said that it takes such a terrible war for people to see what one is capable of when put to the test. Triss 16. As he walked into the Lord's bedchambers of the Dun Fort, Triss furiously kicked a bedside table down. He roared and shouted hatred at the defeat. Fucking Dothraki scum. Fucking barbaric savages cost me my victory. Trey's anger was waxed hit as he looked from the windows and onto what was left of his army. They now numbered 45,000 men, though less than 5,000 couldn't wield weapons. Trey's heard footsteps enter his chambers. "Your Grace." "Enter," Trey's replied angrily. In came Rowley, Franklin, Brendel, Balak and Dick. Dick was still angered over the death of Will, whom had been slain by Jaime Lannister during the battle. "What is it?" Trey's demanded. "Once we rest and recover here, Your Grace, what do we do next?" asked Brendel. "We march for the Whispers and abandon Duskendale," replied Trys. "Abandon the city?" asked Franklin. "Why abandon it, Your Grace?" asked Rowley. "Because I won't trick the Targaryens," Trys replied. "How will this trick them?" asked Balak. "At the Whispers, we will resupply and gather reinforcements from Essos. But whilst we do so, we fortify, and we let the Targaryens know where we are. The Targaryen boy will lead all of his armies to crush us. But, whilst he thinks we are running and losing, we will just turn the tide. We will crush them for good at the Whispers. And the head of that Targaryen boy shall decorate the Red Keep." They seemed reassured at the change in plan. "How soon can we march for the Whispers and abandon the city?" asked Trys. "A week from now, Your Grace. The local maesters and healers we brought from Essos will need as much time as they can to heal and treat our wounded," said Franklin. "But you would suggest a week?" asked Trys. "Yes," he replied. "What of Euron Greyjoy? Has there been news from him?" asked Rowley. "Only that he has been busy taking merchant ships and sea patrols. But he also says that a war fleet are on its way to him, made up of fleets of the Lannisters, Hightowers, Redwynes and Greyjoy," said Dick. "Then we needn't worry," said Trys. "Why is that, Your Grace?" asked Franklin. "Because they will be under Paxter Redwyne's command. And he is a man whom has never fought at sea before in his life, whether against one pirate ship or an entire war fleet. All he has ever done has been blockade Storm's End and starve it for a whole year," Trys replied. Now reassured from his meeting with his friends and subordinates, Trys felt reassured as they left. "The Dothraki and Kulrakaro may have lost me the Battle of King's Valley, but I will not fall into the pit of arrogance as they will. They think that they have won the war. They have won nothing. It is at the Whispers that I began this war, and it is where I will end it. I will break their army there and slaughter every last fucking bastard that dared to take up arms against the Black Fires. And I will cut off Aegon Targaryen's head and gift it to his pretty little queen." Brandon X. The victory at King's Valley had raised the spirits of all men whom had fought. From squires to soldiers. From knights to lords. And from lords paramount to Brandon's own Goodson. But whilst they had suffered only 6,000 casualties in comparison to the enemy's 30,000, Brandon knew that the war was far from over. They celebrate, drink and feast as though the war is won. As long as Blackfyr still lives, this war is not over. We must take back the initiative, chase after Blackfyr and kill the evil bastard. Uncle Brandon. Brandon turned around to his good squire, his nephew Benjicott. "Aye, Benji," asked Brandon with a smile. "The king summons all lords to his pavilion," he said. "Aye. Let's go then. It's bad to keep a king waiting, even if he is wed to your own daughter," Brandon said with a grin. Brandon was followed outside by Benjicott and they walked together for the royal pavilion, where Alisa Thorne and Oswell Went vigilantly stood guard outside, both of whom darkly glared at Tywin Lannister as he crossed the threshold and inside the pavilion. "You have no shortage of people across the Seven Kingdoms whom hate you, Tywin Lannister. The Targaryens, the Martells, the people of King's Landing and those whom know full well what you tried to do that day. At least Jaime will be a good Lord Lannister when you die." When all lords were gathered inside the pavilion, Aegon spoke up from his seat. "My lords, thank you all for attending. Now, in spite of our great victory, Lord Gunser of House Sunglass arrives with news of our enemy." "What news, my king?" asked Brandon. Aegon gestured to Gunser Sunglass, whom spoke up. "Your Grace, my lords. Blackfyr has left Duskendale with his entire army and left no garrison there," he said. "None at all?" asked Stannis Baratheon. "Not even a single soldier, Lord Baratheon," he replied. "Where does he and his army go then?" asked Oberyn Martell. "Back to Cracklaw Point, Prince Oberyn." "Cracklaw Point? Does he plan to be sailed from King's Landing to somewhere else? Lord Sunglass, how many of his army are fit and ready for battle? Asked Randil Tarly. At least 45,000, my Lord Tarly, replied the Lord of Sweetport Sound. His numbers can replenish once he replenishes at the Whispers. Euron Greyjoy can bring supplies and reinforcements from Essos. The longer we leave him to rest in Cracklaw Point, the more dangerous he becomes, and all that we achieved at King's Valley will have been for nothing. The Blackguard will never dare to threaten your authority or your birthright again, Your Grace. He will soon flee to Lies with his tail between his legs, mark my words, said Mace Tyrell arrogantly. I disagree, Lord Tyrell. All accounts of him tell that he is a battle-hardened warrior and one whom will refuse to give up, said Oberyn Martell. Prince Oberyn speaks truth, Your Grace. Even with a smaller army than ours, he can still gather more reinforcements at the Whispers or even sail elsewhere with his army. He might even sail his army to attack King's Landing whilst we are still encamped here. Brandon turned to Robb after he finished his speech. Smart thinking, Robb. There is sense in Lord Robb's words, Your Grace. Should Blackfyr retreat to the Whispers, unchallenged, we will only allow him the time he needs to plan how to strike back. And he may even sail towards King's Landing if we do not march at once upon the Whispers before he has the chance to escape, said Tywin Lannister. Shut up, you fucking prick. Don't pretend for one fucking minute that you wouldn't be the first to switch sides if we had lost at King's Valley. If we had lost at the Trident, you would have marched your army to sack Riverrun to prove your loyalty to Aerys the Mad. Aegon looked at the map, at the Whispers. Brandon noticed how his eyes traced the sea route from Cracklaw Point to King's Landing. My daughter is there and I will not stay here and idle any longer when Blackfyr could sail to the capital in just a few days. What say you, my lords? Asked Aegon. All lords began talking, each one louder than the next to make themselves heard. Until the Lord of Winterfell spoke his mind. Shut the fuck up. All of you. All looked at him surprised as Brandon turned to his goodson. Your Grace, we must march on the Whispers. Whatever he is planning, the longer he is allowed to roam free, means even more peril for all of the Crown lands and the realm as a whole. Especially for the capital, said Brandon. All lords gathered in the pavilion agreed with Brandon, including Mace Tyrell when he saw that he was outnumbered by those whom disagreed with him. Very well, my lords. Tonight, we break camp and march straight for the Whispers. On the journey, Lord Bramfield shall command our scouts heading for the peninsula and watch out for all of Blackfyr's scouts and find out what he is doing there before battle can begin. Your Grace, all said before he gestured for all to leave. Chapter 50, Raising the Flag of the Kraken. Chapter text. Theon 12. So, Blackfyr's last move on the Sevastopol is the Crow's Eye and his fleet. But he hasn't counted on me, Theon thought as he finished reading the letter from Lady Valynia Velaryon, telling of the recent news from the fighting between the king and Triss Blackfyr. What news is there? Theon looked up at Asher, Uncle Roderick, Henk, Harwin and Aron. Good news, on 2 points, Theon replied as he stood up and pointed at the borders between the Crown lands and the Riverlands on the map. The king and the combined armies defeated the Blackfyr army at King's Valley, slaughtering half of his army. Blackfyr has limped back to Duskendale and now back to the Whispers, where he is fortifying and having the Crow's Eye drop off supplies and reinforcements there, said Theon. And the second point? Asked Aron. The Crow's Eye's entire fleet is now in the waters of Cracklaw Point, giving us the perfect chance to strike, Theon explained. Finally. So, when do we set sail? Asked the lady captain of the Iron Fleet. Now, Theon replied. Within 2 hours, the combined fleets of the Iron Islands, Lannisport, Old Town and the Arbor set sail from the shores of Gulltown for Cracklaw Point. Theon stood at the forecastle, holding up his Mirish spyglass and looking at all the ships gathered along the coastlines, all turned to his fleets, ready to fight. All ships were decorated with the red and black sails of House Blackfyr. All except for one. A ship Theon knew from his childhood years in Pike, for he became Uncle Roderick's ward at 10 Towers. Theon felt a bone-chilling shiver just from looking at it. The ship was painted black and red, just like the sails of all other ships around it. But its sails were not of a black three-headed dragon on red like the other ships. Its sails were dark grey with a red eye at the bottom, a black crown above it and 2 flying crows on either side of the eye and the crown. The silence. Theon turned to Loren. Signal the Red Wines to hit the right flank and the Hightowers to hit the left flank. The Lannisters strike at the front with us and half the Iron Fleet, Theon commanded. And what of Lady Asher? Asked Loren. Once we attack, she leads the other half and hits the bastards at the rear. And let's see if the bastard Crozai can escape us again. Theon ran up to the helm as Nicole steered them towards the Silence. Oil. Bring up the oil. Theon shouted down below. Urzen and half a dozen other sailors began bringing up jars of oil and with twisted rope fuses tucked into the oil and sticking out of the lid. Once lit, the bastards will burn, Theon thought with a grin. Uncle Roderick's ship, the Sea Song, and Henk's ship, the Shark's Scythe, sailed on either side of the Iron Kraken. Theon looked with his spyglass at the Crozai and his fleet. As they came within a mile's distance between the Iron Kraken and a few Yitish pirate ships serving under the Crozai, Theon shouted commands to his crew. Prepare to throw oil when we turn and when I give command. Theon commanded. He turned to Nicole. As soon as I say so, steer us hard to the left. But, my lord, those 4 ships are sailing hard for us, he replied. Aye, they are. And better targets for our oil when we turn, he explained. And we won't burn whilst they burn as we turn. Theon eyed the Yitish ship on the furthest left. We board that one on the left. Now turn. Theon commanded Nicole. Nicole steered them hard to the left. Throw the oil. Light the jars. Theon shouted down to Urzen. Aye, my lord, he replied. Just as they began to turn, they began to hurl lit oil jars at the hulls of the 3 other ships. Theon grinned as they exploded on impact, burning several of the pirates. And the flames soon caught the sails as they turned. And just as Theon had predicted, they had narrowly avoided the flames as they turned towards the last of the Yitish ships. Prepare to board. Slaughter the bastards. Theon shouted as he reached for Unrelenting. His sword's grey blade glimmered beautifully in the sunshine. The sun will soon set on all you scum, Theon thought as he whirled Unrelenting in a circle before he ran to the side, looking at the shocked Yitish pirates. Are you ready to die? Theon taunted in Yitish before he grabbed a rigging rope and leapt across from the side. Theon dropped down onto the hull, eviscerating a pirate from his head to his groin, as he landed. He proceeded to slice the throat of a second before stabbing a third as he held his shield up to block the sword of another. Theon responded by slicing at his knee. As he fell, screaming, as he landed on his knees, Theon beheaded him. Theon looked up at the helm to see their captain. He ran up towards him whilst his crew climbed or jumped aboard, killing pirates at will. Theon stabbed one as he ran up the steps towards the helm. He cut at a second before grabbing him by his neck and throwing him into the water. He pointed Unrelenting at the captain. The captain pointed his own sword at Theon. Theon, familiar with how the Yitish fought from taking 6 Yitish pirate ships, roared as he made a parrying thrust towards him. As the captain swung his sword down to block it, Theon pulled it back and parried it across, disarming the captain. Theon didn't hesitate to stab the captain in the heart. Back aboard, lads. Back aboard. Theon commanded. After bringing loot from the ship aboard the Iron Kraken, they continued sailing towards the Silence. On the route towards it, Theon and his crew took an additional 4 pirate ships and a sail ship sailing under the command of the House Rugaria of Lies. As Theon stood at the helm, he looked down at his tired hand, holding Unrelenting. Twice he had switched hands from overuse of Unrelenting and killing pirates and sails. I am exhausted. By the drowned god, I hope that after this war, I won't have to sail to war again. I just want to see Missandei again and start a family with her. Blood was caked onto Theon's armor, his hands and his face. Blood from the many men he killed aboard the 6 ships he took. And some was his own blood from 5 wounds he took on his arms and 2 on his face. He felt his underclothes underneath his armor and even his boots were drenched with blood as he walked to the forecastle. Prepare to board. Today, lads. We kill the Crozai. Theon roared. His crew cheered and roared in reply as they started to get ready to board. Shoot. Theon ordered. A dozen of his men shot arrows skillfully at the crew of the Silence. All mutes, for they fell and not a scream was heard. Board the scum. Theon shouted as he grabbed a rigging rope and swung himself across. Drowned god, give me the strength I need to kill the foulest servant of the storm god. Theon beheaded a mute sailor as he landed on the hull. He turned to see him stood at the helm. Just as Theon remembered the last time he had seen him. Though he looked as though he hadn't aged a day since Theon had left Pike for 10 Towers to begin as a ward of Uncle Roderick. Crow's Eye. Dear nephew. Little Theon. By the drowned god, you have grown into a ferocious little kraken, he said with a mocking laugh as he removed his eye patch which covered his blue smiling eye. Come, Crow's Eye. You've nowhere to fly now, you fucking evil prick. Theon boomed as he pointed unrelenting at him. One of his mutes charged at him with an axe as he pointed unrelenting. Theon dodged the blow and swiftly eviscerated him before stabbing another in the throat. He panted as he walked towards the stairs leading to the helm. His crew all were fighting the crew of the Crow's Eye whilst Theon stalked towards him. The man whom murdered Uncles Aeron and Victorian. The man whom murdered Maron and Roderick. And the man whom murdered Father. No fucking shortage of my family are dead because of you, Theon snarled as he kept unrelenting pointed at him. No, there isn't, he conceded with a nod. But they were my family, also, Theon. All of them. Father. Harlon. Robin. Aeron. Victorian. Balon. And of course, your brothers, he replied ordinarily as he drew an axe and a dagger. Theon noticed the steel of them both. They were both Valyrian steel. Grandfather Quayan, Uncle Harlon and Uncle Robin as well. What the 7 fucking hells does kin mean to you? And then he looked at his armor. It bore the same color as Theon's sword and the axe and dagger of the Crow's Eye. The armor was scaled and the scales were edged in red gold and gleamed and shimmered as he moved. Theon spotted Valyrian GLYPHS on each scale, illuminated in the sunlight. Not only does he have an axe and dagger of Valyrian steel, he also has Valyrian steel armor. How would the drowned god allow me to live and to sail if I were to have my way and slaughter so many of mine own kin, he asked with an innocent shrug. Would the drowned god forgive you for killing me, he wondered as he lifted his weapons up in a mocking surrender. The drowned god will delight in the death of one as foul and as twisted as you. He laughed evilly as he faced Theon. Oh. I have heard plenty of you, little kraken. Ever since you took the sea stone chair. How many pirate ships you took. How you claimed your sword as the Red Kraken claimed his own. How you slew Andric the Unsmiling. How you took the Stepstones. And how you took the Titan's Tower. You have done well, slaughtering pirates, sea raiders, slavers and reavers in thousands. But what would the drowned god think of you, in turning from the old way and becoming like father as the reader taught you? I taught him the truth of the world, Crow's Eye. Whilst you only want to bleed and burn the world. Theon glanced to his side to see his crew and Uncle Roderick look up at Theon as he faced the Crow's Eye. He laughed as he turned from Theon to Uncle Roderick. Bleed and burn the world. Why, no true words have ever been said. But, then again, I can expect nothing but wisdom from you, reader, he replied. Enough. Theon screamed as he sliced unrelenting across. He blocked it with his dagger before swinging his axe at Theon. Theon felt his axe cut into his shoulder. As he groaned, his dagger sliced at Theon's cheek. Theon growled before he roared and sliced unrelenting at him. As he blocked a series of blows from his axe and dagger, Theon noticed his legs. Though his armor covered his upper and lower body, his greaves only covered his lower legs, but not the heel. And his bracers on his arms barely covered his elbows. That's how I'll get him. As the Crow's Eye laughed at Theon whilst he swung his axe at him, Theon blocked the blow and put his gloved hand on the tip of Unrelenting. He pushed the blade down, feeling his own sword cut into his glove and into his flesh, until the tip was almost touching the arm of his hated enemy. The Crow's Eye sniggered as he thrusted his dagger at him. Theon dodged away from the thrust before slicing the tip of his sword down onto his elbow, the same arm which held his dagger. He grinned at hearing the Crow's Eye scream in pain. Theon swung furiously down onto his weakened arm. Though the bracer blocked the blow, the force of the blow forced him to let go of his dagger. Theon kicked at him and sliced at his heel. Again, the Crow's Eye screamed. But as he turned to face Theon, he laughed. He laughed and did not reach for either his wounded elbow or his bleeding heel. Look at you, little nephew. Little kraken. If only Balon could see how vicious I made his son. Who knows? Maybe he would have been proud of you. Perhaps he might have made you his heir, rather than his stupid other sons. Perhaps you should be thanking me on bended knee, for killing them that you did become Lord of Pike. Theon roared as he punched him hard on the nose. But the punch, which battered and blooded his nose, only seemed to amuse him even more. Theon growled as he pointed unrelenting at the crow's eye's head. Go on. Kill me. The only way to make yourself a man is to make yourself a god, he said as both his malevolent eyes glared into Theon's own and into his soul. And gods don't follow rules. They are feared by all. Why should you let something as stupid as kinslaying hold your blade back, he said as he threw his axe aside and held his arms up. Theon inhaled and snarled as he lifted unrelenting up high with both hands, ready to cut his head off. Stop. Theon exhaled and panted as he stared at Uncle Roderick, holding him back with both hands, his hands clasped around Theon's wrists, pushing him back a few steps. You are not a kinslayer like he, Theon. Do not become him, he said with pleading eyes and gently shaking his head at him. He murdered my whole family. He's a monster that deserves no pity. Theon whispered. He is all of those things, and more. He is the most unspeakably despicable monster of all. But you will wander a dark path should you be the one to do it, said Uncle Roderick. Theon lowered unrelenting as he panted in exhaustion. Uncle Roderick nodded and patted him on the shoulder. More words of wisdom from the all-knowing reader, taunted the crow's eye whilst clicking his tongue. Both turned to face him. My sister lost her husband to you, crow's eye. Fool that he may have been, she loved him. And she loved the children she bore him. Including their first two, Roderick and Maren. But then you took them from her. Your own kin. For no other reason than for your own sordid pleasure and for power, snapped Uncle Roderick as he faced him. That I did, he replied with a laugh on his pale face, paling from blood loss. Uncle Roderick closed the distance between them as the crow's eye continued to laugh. I felt so hopeless that day, when I heard what happened. I thought I might never see my sister or her children again. But I gave thanks to the drowned god when I discovered that she was well. She and Asher. And I hated myself for many years that I was never there for her, when you had murdered her husband and her sons. And what, reader, he taunted. And this? Uncle Roderick threw his own sword, Nightfall, aside and roared as he grabbed the crow's eye by his shoulders. He pushed him over the side until only his head was underwater. May the drowned god take you and drown you in the poison and bile that runs in your veins rather than blood, you evil cunt. Uncle Roderick shouted with such hatred and fury that Theon had never seen on him before. Theon only watched as the crow's eye didn't even struggle as he was being suffocated in the water. After a minute, Uncle Roderick pulled him back onto the deck. Theon stared at his body. His pale body showed no sign of any life left in him. His eye patch was long since gone. And both his eyes, one sky blue and the other as black as night, stared up at Theon and at Uncle Roderick. Uncle Roderick took up House Harlaw's sword, Nightfall, and lifted it up high before slicing it down onto the crow's eye's neck. As his head rolled free from the rest of his body, Uncle Roderick spat on it. May you never be welcomed by the drowned god in his hall, he snarled. He calmed before looking up at Theon. Come, Theon. Theon nodded before turning to Urzen. Bring me one of those oil jars. He ran back aboard the Iron Kraken and brought back a jar of oil whilst Theon took the axe, dagger and armor of the crow's eye. Theon tore the lid off and poured the oil all over the corpse before he lit it alight. Burn this accursed fucking ship. Theon commanded as he walked back aboard the Iron Kraken and Uncle Roderick returned to the sea song. Chapter 51, The Whispers of Battle. Chapter text. Tris 17. Tris told around the whispers, seeing all preparations made for the battle. We could take King's Landing, but only a fool takes a kingdom's capital before they have crushed said kingdom's army. Once you have done both, then you have won. But if you take the capital first, then every soldier whom died fighting becomes a martyr for that army to avenge them and to fight to free their capital. The fortifications of the Whispers were easy due to the natural defenses they had. The once former castle and seat of House Crab, destroyed 1,000 years ago, still had the stones which provided the base and mortar for the walls and the keep. In the remnants of the keep, there was only the stone base and the trees growing in the center, where Tris and his commanders rested. On the hill where the Whispers was situated, sharpened stakes were planted and trenches were dug, both at the base of the hill and the top of the hill. And with the abundance of trees they had the resources to craft more sharpened stakes and even palisades. Tris planned the defenses of the Whispers to be such that it would inflict as many casualties as possible on the Targaryen army. Once we crush their army, then we sail to King's Landing. We will offer no quarter nor mercy to the bastards. For what Aegon did to my army at King's Valley, I will allow my army to take their frustrations out on the people of King's Landing. As Tris looked at the main route to the Whispers, he saw a group of his scouts riding towards them. I hope they bring me good news. Your Grace. Tris turned around to see Prendel Nuggeson. Captain Tris said with a nod, not hearing the urgency in the voice of the captain of the Storacrows. Euron Greyjoy is dead. Tris turned in shock at hearing this news. He is dead. How is he dead? How did he die? The Redwynes couldn't have done it. Paxter Redwyne knows not of how to sail into battle or even to fight a pirate ship. Someone else did this. Who killed him? Tris demanded. Roderick Harlaw of the Iron Fleet. And the fleet? What of my fleet? Tris demanded. Most were captured and the rest were sunk. Few surrendered or retreated after the battle, he replied. Battle? With who? The Iron Fleet, commanded by Euron Greyjoy's nephew, Theon. Whilst Tris wanted to kill him for bringing this news, he inhaled and exhaled several times to calm down. With Greyjoy dead and his fleet destroyed, then we have lost any chances of reinforcements and of resupplying. It was then that the scouts returned to the Whispers. Upon seeing Tris, they rode towards him. You have news? We do, Your Grace. The Targaryen army comes, said the lead scout. Good. Excellent. Then they will all die at the Whispers and I will take Aegon Targaryen's head off. How many do they number? 60,000 men, Your Grace, he replied. And when will they arrive? Tris eagerly asked. They'll be here within a week at most and 5 days at the least, Your Grace. Tris and Prendel walked together to his pavilion, where he saw Dagon cleaning Tris' armor and his beloved sword. Dagon, bring all my commanders and captains here at once. Yes, Your Grace, said Dagon. Tris looked at the map of Cracklaw Point and placed the army pieces of the Targaryens at the edge of the map, just as Dagon returned with his commanders. Are they in Cracklaw Point, Your Grace? Asked Franklin. No. But they will be soon. They have 60,000 men and will come within 5 or 7 days, Tris replied. We have the same in numbers of men ready to fight, Your Grace, said Prendel. And what of the wounded? How many wounded are there? Asked Tris. Still 3,000, replied Dick. Can they at least shoot arrows? Asked Tris. Shoot arrows? I think so, Dick conceded with a nod. Then that is what they will do. If they lack the legs to do it, grant them a horse to shoot from, Tris replied. And what of those who lack an arm? Asked Balak. They will bring fresh arrows to the archers, Tris replied. Come, Targaryen. Come and destroy your own army trying to destroy me and mine. Aegon 9. Looking at the Whispers, Aegon couldn't help but feel uneasy. Even if this was his first war and he had no experience as a general before this, he could tell just from looking at the defenses prepared by the Black Fires, that it would be impossible to take the Whispers without heavy casualties. Is there no other way? Asked Tris. None, Your Grace. Theon Greyjoy sent word that ever since he destroyed their fleet, they have also fortified the beaches in case of an attack by sea, said Tywin Lannister. Damn it all. Then, my lords, what plan do you suggest? Asked Aegon. Aegon looked at the defenses as his lords spoke. At the base of the hill, there were palisades and sharpened stakes protecting their archers. There were even trenches which protected the archers. No army of mounted knights could break through that. My king, we could have our infantry charge at them to smash through the palisades and stakes, and once they have fallen back, then our cavalry can break through, suggested Mace Tyrell. They have sharpened stakes at the top also, Lord Tyrell Randall Tarly pointed out. And there's no telling what other defenses he has at the top, Your Grace, said Stannis Baratheon. It's clear what he hopes to achieve here, said Uncle Oberyn. What do you mean, uncle? Asked Egon. Your Grace, he wants to break our army and our resolve and to kill you. He has planned this battle to inflict as many casualties on us as possible. He wants to turn the tide of the war back in his favor with a single battle now that he has lost half his army and his entire fleet, Uncle Oberyn explained. Could we launch an attack on their front whilst having another attack launched by sea, suggested Brandon. We could, Lord Stark, but it is as Lord Tywine said. They have men and defences on the beach which even the mighty Ironborn would struggle against, said Bronze Yohn Royce. We could send a small force of infantry to attack and draw their fire towards them before having a larger force of infantry to join the fight and break through their defences, suggested Robb. It's always Robb whom comes up with the brilliant ideas at warfare. I'm glad that we are not enemies. It is a dangerous plan. And one in which would mean suicide for the small force, said Mace Tyrell. Any other plan would involve the deaths of thousands more, Lord Tyrell. But there is merit in Lord Robb's plan, said Randall Tully. How? Asked Edmure Tully. By attacking with a small force, they would fool the Black Fires into thinking that it was a full-scale attack and muster all of their men to their defences. And once the small force of infantry got to the enemy archers, then more infantry would pour in to crush the archers and clear the palisades and stakes, Tywine Lannister explained. The Black Fires would respond by sending as many of their armies as they could to crush the infantry, Uncle Oberyn pointed out. They would, Prince Oberyn, and then we would counter-attack with our armies and finally crush them and kill Blackfyre, once and for all, said Lord Commander Hightower. Then whom will lead the infantry? Asked Elbereth Arryn. I will, Uncle Elbereth, said Robb. No, I will lead them. All turned to Egon at his statement. Your Grace, you cannot endanger your life, so insisted Mace Tyrell. I would not have more brave men die in my name, Lord Tyrell, if I did not fight alongside them. At least this way, once Blackfyre sees me, he will be drawn in like a moth to the flame, Egon replied. And can be killed, given the chance, Jaime Lannister said, realizing what Egon was saying. Precisely, Sir Jaime. For Blackfyre is the only one holding that army together. Once he is dead and they see him dead, then they will falter and have no more cause to fight, Egon explained. Just one more battle, and this war will be over. Egon prayed to the warrior and to the Father for deliverance from the fighting as the lords all left. We will be at your side throughout the fighting, my king, Sir Arthur assured him. I have no doubt, Egon replied as he stood up and was equipped with his armor by Montoris. Egon drew Dark Sister and held up his shield as he walked with Lord Commander Hightower, Sir Oswell, Sir Arthur, Sir Lyle, Sir Alisa, Lucas and Asher. They saw the small force of infantry that had been chosen for the fighting. They were 500 infantry of House Umber of Last Hearth, led by the great Jon Umber himself, a large and brutish warrior, taller and more muscular than Sir Lyle Hall. Though it was his eldest son and heir, Smalljon, whom was taller and stronger than his father. Robb, Egon was glad to see, was fighting alongside the Umbers. With the Umbers and their men, we will surely break through Blackfyre's front lines. Egon ordered for Tywine Lannister and Mace Tyrell to join the battle once the Blackfyre reinforcements had joined the fighting, and that once more of the enemy's men poured in, more of theirs would join battle. Chapter 52, The Red Dragon and the Black Dragon. Chapter text. Lucas 7. At the blowing of a ferocious war horn of House Umber, blown by the great Jon Umber himself, Egon led the charge across the field of battle towards the Blackfyre archers. For Raventree Hall. For House Blackwood. For King Egon. Always steadfast. Lucas roared as he ran across the field, holding his shield up as he did so. It wasn't until they had reached halfway across the battlefield that Lucas could hear arrows whistling in the sky. Few struck at the men behind him. One struck at his shield, the arrowhead protruded through by half an inch, just above his hand. But he felt glad-hearted at hearing the ferocious roars and grunts of the men of Last Hearth as they toughened themselves at being struck by arrows. Lucas saw the first few archers on the palisades behind the stakes. He carefully ran through the stakes first and threw his spear at one of the archers. His spear impaled the archer in the stomach before Lucas cut at the bow of another. His blow cut the bow in half and hung hopelessly from his hand before Lucas stabbed him in the chest. He smiled at seeing the rest of the infantry reach the palisades. Lucas climbed onto the palisade, only 5 feet off of the ground, but high enough to be an excellent vantage point for the archers to shoot them from. Lucas, weary from the running, panted as an archer drew a sword and struck at him. The blow cut the arrow impaled in his shield in half, but bounced uselessly off his shield. Lucas proceeded to cut at his knee and then his throat. Umbermen began chopping and cutting the archers with ease once they were upon them. And he witnessed small Jan Umber behead 3 men with one swing of his enormous great sword before he impaled another with it. And Egon fared well, with 2 arrows struck in his shield and having just cut down an archer before a war horn could be heard from the front. Lucas looked up to the whispers, where infantry began to charge down the hill towards them. "They come, your grace," Sir Alisa said as he readied himself to fight again. "All the better, Sir Alisa," Egon replied before he blew his own war horn. "Are you ready for more, men of Last Hearth?" roared the great Jan Umber. The men of Last Hearth hooted with their lord and the heir to Last Hearth as they held shields up and readied themselves for the Black Fear charge. Lucas stood alongside Asher, panting at the fighting they had done already. "Lost your shield already, Asher?" he asked. "Ditched it as soon as we came upon these lot," explained Asher. "And being shot at didn't make you rethink using a shield? You know me too well, Blackwood. Why use a shield when the old gods gave me 2 hands and I can use them both for weapons?" Asher wondered. Lucas was glad that there were no archers firing down on them as the Black Feres charged. "Hold your ground, men. Show these sellswords and cowards the fury of the north," Rob bellowed to his fellow northerners. Lucas noticed Asher smile at hearing that. The front line of Black Fear soldiers were men of the Golden Company, Lucas recognized. 4 warriors of the Golden Company came towards he and Asher. Lucas blocked a spear thrust from one and parried it aside with his shield before slicing his throat with his sword. The other smashed a mallet at Lucas. Lucas cut the mallet in half midair before stabbing him in the throat. As he pulled his sword from his neck, he turned to see Asher had already killed his 2 opponents and moved on to his next, a knight of the Golden Company, whom he easily cut down with 2 strikes of his sword and his axe. "Protect the king! Protect the king!" Lucas turned at hearing the words of Lord Commander Hightower, whom looked exhausted and wounded from a wound on his neck. Lucas grabbed Asher by his shoulder and pulled him as he ran for Egon, whom seemed to be getting overwhelmed by soldiers running for him. Lucas yelled out as he threw his dagger at one. The dagger caught the man in the back of his neck and he groaned before falling onto his face as Egon cut down one of his comrades. 3 turned to face he and Asher. Lucas parried the thrust from one sword before he stabbed him in the heart. Asher quickly buried his axe into the skull of the second before the 2 simultaneously stabbed the third man with their swords. Lucas was glad to see that Egon appeared to unharmed, though his Kingsguard were either exhausted, wounded or both. Sir Oswell knelt by Lord Commander Hightower's side, whom was struggling to keep upright as he was on both knees. Lord Commander Sir Oswell whispered, "Keep fighting. Protect the king," was all he said before he fell from his knees and then onto his back, his sword still encased in both his hands. "More of these bastards," Sir Lyle muttered. Lucas looked up from Lord Commander Hightower as dozens more infantry came running towards them. Lucas and Asher were the first to attack them, hoping to hold them back for the Kingsguard to better protect Egon. Lucas thrust his shield into the belly of one wearing only chainmail and then slit his throat before cutting down another as he charged at him, sword raised. Another struck at his shield before Lucas cut at his hip and then beheaded him with a powerful swing of his sword. Lucas panted as he ran to his next opponent. He swung his shield at his forehead. The man screamed as his head split from the blow. His screaming ended when Lucas stabbed him in the face, his sword impaling his brains through his chin. The second son of Lord Titus Blackwood smiled when he saw Asher cut down half a dozen men with ease before they turned to Egon, whose Kingsguard formed a protective circle around him, killing over a dozen men as they tried to charge at the king. But as Sir Alisa stabbed a Golden Company knight, 2 spearmen charged at Sir Oswell. As he killed one, the other swiftly thrusted his spear at Sir Oswell's helm. Sir Lyle roared as he ran towards his sworn brother and then beheaded the spearman. Sir Oswell fell onto the ground, a spear impaling his skull. "Protect the king," Sir Alisa commanded Asher and Lucas. Both ran back to defend the king as they tightened the semicircle around Egon, whom looked on with sadness at the death of Sir Oswell. Rob X. Rob swung his great sword down, eviscerating the sellsword as he tried to defend himself with his shield. He beheaded the next man and slit the belly open of a third man before cutting him down. Rob panted as he looked for his next opponent. But as he did so, he saw something unexpected in the enemy's formation. When Rob saw it, he grinned at realizing what he could do to win this battle. He turned around to see the fighting men of Carhold and the men and women of Bear Island charging to join battle. He ran towards them, cutting another soldier down as he did so. "Lord Carstark! Lord Mormont," he called to Jorah Mormont and Rickard Carstark. "What is it, young Stark?" asked the Lord of Carhold. "I spotted a goat's path in the hills of the Whispers. It leads on to the Black Fir's rear. If we charge there now, we can break them and smash into them from the flank," he replied. "How sure are you of this, Lord Rob?" asked the Lord of Bear Island. "I am certain, Lord Mormont," Rob replied. "Then what are we waiting for? Men of Carhold, on me!" "To glory!" roared Rickard Carstark, followed closely behind by Harion, Eddard and Torren. Rob led Jorah Mormont, his Aunt Mage and her daughters Daisy, Alysanne, Lyra, Jarell and Lyanna and their armies towards the goat's path. Rob was the first to run onto the beach and up the path to climb up it. He held his great sword up, ready to fight a soldier that spotted him. But none came. He looked around and could see that all Black Fir's men were fighting, not at the top. "There are none here," said Rob as the Carstarks and Mormonts joined him as he walked through the wooded hill just beneath the ruins of the Whispers. "You have a fine eye, Lord Rob. And I should know, for that comes from being warded at Carhold," Rickard Carstark boomed as the men of Carhold ran up the hill from the beach. "Once we are all here, we charge on the Black Fir's rear," Rob said as the men and women of Bear Island began the climb. 3,000 men we may be, but that is all it takes to smash a decisive hole in their ranks and crush their morale before someone can strike the killing blow on Black Fir. Once all had come, they began to form ranks, which was difficult whilst marching through the trees. But once they came within a stone's throw of the enemy, Rob lifted his great sword up. "Charge! Kill them all," he roared. "For Carhold and House Carstark, the son of Winter. For Bear Island and House Mormont. Here we stand." Rob beheaded the first infantryman he came towards as they charged into their ranks. They had been so unprepared, that hundreds of them were cut down before they could turn to face them and try to defend themselves. Rob stabbed another as he tried to swing an axe at him. Then he cut down another from his neck to his hip. And as Rob predicted, the smashing attack at their rear flank had come as such a surprise that the Black Fir's defense was faltering as the Black Fires realized they were being flanked and were panicking. Whilst the men down below cheered and roared at seeing their flank be smashed. "Come on, lads. The day is not over yet. Take the battle and make it your victory," Rob roared. Those around him roared as Rob charged once again into the enemy. Rob cut down a knight as he tried to stab Rob. He stabbed an archer whom was trying to shoot Lyanna Mormont, just as she had beheaded a squire with her axe. As the men and women of Carhold and Bear Island broke through, those at the bottom and Rob and his men enveloped together onto the Black Fir army, pushing them to the opposite side, pinning them down and trapping them. Nowhere to run now, Black Fir, Rob thought aloud with a grin. Tris 18. Tris' anger fueled him with energy as he cut down every soldier and knight that dared to come near him. He beheaded a knight wearing the sigil of House Hightower on his cuirass and then eviscerated a knight of House Marbrand before stabbing a knight of House Royce. But then, after cutting down 3 soldiers of House Celtigar, he heard the booming voice of Dick Cole. "Your Grace. Aegon Targaryen." "What? Where is he? Where is my enemy?" Desperately, Tris looked around for all that stood between him and his victory. But as he turned and looked down at the palisades, he saw him. Surrounded by 3 Kingsguard knights, their armor of gold glittered with the red blood of all men they had slain. But the man they surrounded, there could be no doubt as to whom he was. He was tall, handsome and young, with long silver-gold Valyrian hair reaching down to the nape of his neck. In his hand, he wielded what could only be a Valyrian steel longsword, Dark Sister, Tris realized. At the forefront of the fighting, he stood with his men and knights, fighting. "Brave. You truly are a son of old Valyria. And the blood of the conqueror truly runs into your veins. But it also runs in my veins. Your bravery shall be honored, Aegon Targaryen. But for now, your time has come." Recklessly, Tris ran towards him. He ignored all shouts behind him as he cut down all whom stood in his way. Targaryen. It's over. It's between you and I now. He could see the Targaryen boy look up at him with his Kingsguard knights, and 2 knights stood by the Kingsguard, protecting their king just as they were. Tris looked at the several infantrymen and knights whom stood in his way in the brutal fighting taking place. A spearman thrusted his spear at him. Tris glanced it aside and swiftly cut him from his belly to his neck. He dodged the long axe swing of another before stabbing him in the belly. A knight roared as he came running towards him, sword and shield raised. His roar came to an abrupt end after Blackfyr sliced his throat. He parried the sword thrust of another knight before beheading him swiftly and turning to another knight. Tris eviscerated him from his shoulder to his groin before stabbing a man wielding a large warhammer. He dropped the warhammer as Tris' sword impaled him through his heart. Tired, but undeterred, Tris advanced towards Aegon Targaryen. Highgarden, screamed a boy wielding a sword and shield and with 3 golden roses of House Tyrell painted on his shield. He swiftly swung his sword at Tris' throat. Blackfyr met the Tyrell boy's sword midair, but just as swiftly, did Tris slice at his knee and kick him to the ground. Blackfyr. Face me. Tris turned to a knight wielding a pale great sword in his hands. He was handsome with an aging of black hair mixed with grey on his head and on his beard. Just from the sword, Tris knew whom he was. Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning. Come, Dayne. Come and kill me. Tris shouted. Dayne obliged, charging at him with his pale sword clashing against Blackfyr. Dayne thrusted Dawn at Tris' throat. Tris glanced it aside with Blackfyr, swinging it at his chest. Dayne managed to block it and push it aside. Tris thrusted Blackfyr at him. Dayne blocked the blow and pushed into him, their swords clashing midair. Tris pushed him back before sidestepping out of the way and slicing across at his pauldron. He grinned to see the red blood flow from his wound. Dayne grunted as he turned to face him. He clashed Dawn down onto Tris, their swords touching until he cut at Tris' helm. His helm fell from his head. Tris didn't care as he sliced across at Dayne. Let them see my face. Let Targaryen see the face of the Blackfyr whom shall soon kill him. Dayne swung Dawn across at Tris. Tris held Blackfyr up and parried it across before slicing at Dayne's face. Blackfyr only just cut at his cheek. Dayne roared as he swung at Tris' chest. Tris grunted as he held up Blackfyr to block the blow. Block it, he did. He pulled Blackfyr back and cut across at Dayne's throat. Dayne just managed to block the blow with Dawn. He roared as he pushed Tris back. Tris roared before he ducked Dayne's swing with Dawn. And he cut at Dayne's knee before he thrusted at Dayne's head. The Sword of the Morning dropped Dawn as Blackfyr impaled through his skull and into his brains. Tris panted as he grinned before turning to face Aegon Targaryen. He looked down at Targaryen, whom still had 2 Kingsguard knights protecting him, as well as the 2 young knights, both of whom were covered in the blood of Tris' men. Asher 7. Asher gulped as he watched brave Sir Arthur die at the hands of Blackfyr. It ends today, Targaryen. Blackfyr growled as he lifted high his sword, entirely red and dripping with blood. Not whilst I live. Asher roared as he charged at the man whom started this war. The man whom sacked Duskendale. The man whom unleashed the Dothraki upon the Crownlands and the Riverlands. The man whom killed Lord Commander Hightower, Sir Oswell and Sir Arthur. Asher roared as he swung both axe and sword at Blackfyr. Though he held off each swing, Blackfyr clearly shook from the strength behind each of Asher's blows. Though he is skilled, he ain't as strong as me. Well, his grandfather wasn't Maelys the Monstrous, it was his weak cousin whom he ripped the head off of. Asher twisted around as he swung both axe and sword onto Blackfyr, whom would block each blow with his sword. As Asher swung both his axe and sword onto Blackfyr, Blackfyr parried them aside and tried to stab Asher. But Asher quickly blocked it with his sword and then swung his axe at Blackfyr's head. Blackfyr blocked the swing with his sword. Asher swung his axe at him whilst keeping his sword back. Blackfyr grunted as he blocked the swing with his sword and then tried to slice at Asher's throat. Asher blocked the slice with his sword and pushed his sword towards Blackfyr. Blackfyr tried pushing back. He grinned maliciously as Asher felt the tip cut into his neck, breaking chainmail and skin both with ease. But then Asher roared as he pushed his sword towards him. He shouted House Forrester, before he headbutted Black Phil. Black Phil groaned as blood poured from his nose and his lips. He growled as he swung ferociously at Asher, only for Asher to block each blow with both his sword and his axe. Asher saw how tired he was behind each swing of his bastard sword of Valyrian steel. Asher panted as he saw him cut overhead with Black Phil. Asher, whom could only raise his axe, for his sword-wielding hand was exhausted from overuse, lifted his axe to block the blow. But the ironwood stave snapped like a hot knife through butter as Black Phil cut Asher's axe in half, and then the sword proceeded to cut Asher from his right shoulder to the center of his chest. But the second son of Gregor Forrester refused to die or to give up. He saw Black Phil smirk as he watched the red blood flow from his body and through his armor. Black Phil thrusted at him swiftly. But Asher just managed to block the thrust and glance it aside with his own sword. And before he could pull his sword back, Asher thrusted the grip of what was left of his axe. Through chainmail and flesh, Asher's axe grip protruded from Black Phil's elbow. As he screamed, Asher cut Black Phil's sword down and thrusted his own sword at his neck. He panted as his sword impaled Black Phil through his neck. Asher looked into his eyes, a dark shade of purple like wine grapes. They were opened wide in shock at the final moments of his life. Before he stared at Asher's eyes, he gave a slight nod. At last, he closed his eyes and fell on his back. He is dead. I cannot believe it. He truly is dead. And I slew him. The foul Mummus dragon whom butchered thousands from the lands of Long Summer to the Riverlands. Black Phil is dead. Black Phil is dead. Asher shouted at the top of his voice for all to hear. Asher panted as he sat down by his body. Asher. You're wounded. Lucas called. Never mind me. Egon, is he well? Asked Asher. Aye, he is, Lucas replied. Asher looked around to see tens of thousands of Black Phil soldiers surrendering and throwing down their weapons at the news of the death of their leader. God's willing, there never again will be another such as Triss Black Phil. Thousands are dead, and all for his ambition to steal the Iron Throne, Asher thought before he sheathed his own sword and then claimed Black Phil. Father will forget all that I did with Gwyn Whitehill after today. And now, House Forrester can boast of having a sword of Valyrian steel, Asher thought as he remarked the difference between wielding his own sword and the famed and deadly Black Phil sword, before he wiped the river of blood from the sword. Chapter 53, At War's End. Chapter Text. Sangza 9. How much longer, do you think? Sangza asked the Grand Maester. I should think another moon, perhaps two, my queen, he replied. Sangza inhaled through her nose before gently exhaling through her mouth. Thank you for your time, Grand Maester, she said before he took his leave from the royal bedchambers. Jane was sat by Sangza's side and helped her sit up and gently pushed her hair out of the way of her face. He'll come back, Sangza. He'll be here for when the baby comes, she said with a reassuring smile. Gods, I hope so. This war has gone on long enough. There was an urgent knocking on the chamber doors. My queen. It was Sir Barristan. Enter, sir, said Sangza. Sir Barristan entered the royal bedchambers. My queen. Sir Lancel Lannister returns from the war, he brings important news from the Whispers, he said. At that, both Jane and Myra helped Sangza get out of her bed and stand up. They walked with Sangza to the throne room, protectively helping her if she showed even the slightest sign of pain or discomfort. As they entered the throne room, Sangza saw the nobility all gathered, and Elia, Rolla, John Connington, Sir Baelor and Lord Varys all stood at the side of the Iron Throne. And stood before the Iron Throne was Sir Lancel Lannister. I pray that he once again brings good news. Or even better, for news of the war's end. As Sangza sat down on the Iron Throne, Sir Lancel began. My queen, I bring joyous news. For the Black Phil menace has ended. The Black Phil armies and fleets have been defeated and Triss Black Phil himself has been slain by brave Sir Asher Forrester. Sangza heard Myra gasp at the news of her brother's deeds over the claps and cheers of the nobility gathered inside. Triss Black Phil is dead. And his army and fleet are defeated. This is wondrous news indeed. Thank the gods, new and old both. But what of Egon? Father, Robb, Alaric, Arya, Bern and Rickon. And what of the king, Sir Lancel? She asked. Wounded in the fighting at the Whispers, but he is well, I have been assured, your grace, he replied. Tell us of the battle, Sir Launcelot, said Sansa. Of course, my queen, he replied before he lightly cleared his throat. Upon arriving at the Whispers, we had heard the good news of the Battle of the Whispering Bay and Theon Greyjoy's triumph over his evil uncle. The king decided to press on, in spite of how heavily fortified the Whispers was and how prepared Black Fear was for a final stand. On advice from Lord Robb Stark, a small force of infantry, commanded by the king himself and Lord Robb, attacked the archers based at the base of the hill to lure out the rest of the Black Fear army. Lord Robb's trick worked and it lured out the enemy's army, at which the rest of our army pressed forwards to attack. The fighting was brutal in the centre, where the advantage changed hands many times, and Sir Oswell Went and Sir Gerald Hightower were both slain in the fierce fighting, until Robb Stark led a force of northern infantry to attack their flank through a hidden goat path unknown by the Black Fearess. This forced the Black Fearess back. But it was then that Tris Black Fear himself spotted the king. Just hearing those words made Sansa nervous, having heard of Tris Black Fear's reputation as a warrior. Black Fear slew many brave knights to clear his path towards the king, even wounding brave Sir Loras Tyrell and murdering valiant Sir Arthur Dane, before he was at last confronted by Sir Asher Forrester, whom finally killed him. Seeing the death of their foul leader, what was left of his army surrendered. Sansa inhaled and exhaled quietly whilst the throne room was alive with the excited chattering and gossiping of the nobility gathered. Trying to keep a calm and regal face, Sansa stood from the Iron Throne to face the court whilst noticing Rolla, Elia, Sir Barristan and Sir Luwin, whom reacted to the news of the deaths of Sir Arthur, Sir Oswell and Lord Commander Hightower with sadness. My lords and ladies, Sansa announced as she stood up. Her voice silenced all those still talking. A great victory has been won, one which shall bring a lasting peace and stability to the Seven Kingdoms. Tonight, as well as giving thanks to all the many men whom fought, from the lowest born soldier to our king, we must also give thanks to the many martyrs whom died defending the Seven Kingdoms from the Black Fear menace and the unspeakable cruelties he had inflicted on the people of the Crown Lands. And let us give thanks to the gods, both new and old, whom delivered us all from Tris Black Fear. All clapped as Sansa was escorted from the throne room. In her bedchambers, she sat on her bed and cried tears of joy at the joyous news. Thank the gods, it is all over. Myranda said excitedly. Isn't your wedding to Harold soon? Desmara asked. It was to have been a moon ago, if not for the war. But, now at last, we can wed, she replied happily. But your brother, Myra. Thank the gods for him. Chira exclaimed as Myra wept tears of joy. Gods, I still cannot believe that he did it. Father is never going to stop boasting of it to our White Hill rivals from this day forth. Myra replied. With good reason. Though now, Asher will be a hero House Forrester will boast of for centuries to all the north, said Desmara. And they are safe. Father. Robb. Alaric. Arya. Bone. Rickon. And Aegon. Aegon X. Aegon looked at the doublet the tailor dressed for him. It was finely made specially by Mace Tyrell's personal tailor, come all the way from Highgarden to make clothes for Aegon and for Sansa. Though it wasn't lost on Aegon that Mace Tyrell would have preferred that he would have sent the tailor his way as a gift from a good father to a good son. Aegon looked at himself in the mirror held up by a servant. He inhaled and exhaled softly as he looked at the scar on his cheek, from a spear before the spearman has been killed by Lord Commander Hightower. I have seen battle. I have seen death. I have seen men whom raised me die. I never want to see war or battle again. If losing my friends and loved ones is the price of undying war glory, then it is a price I never want to see paid. So many died in this war. And I never want to be responsible for the deaths of so many ever again, nor do I wish it on my children. Aegon turned when he heard knocking on his door. Your Grace. It is time. I am coming, Sir Luwin, Aegon replied. Aegon exhaled heavily as he opened the door and thanked the servant for his time. Montoris walked beside him as Montoris and Uncle Luwin walked from his chambers to the throne room, where the nobility of the Seven Kingdoms was gathered. For rewards and announcements with the war's end. Aegon heard the loud chatter from the many nobles from the north to dawn gathered in the throne room. He inhaled as he saw them all gathered. What in the seven hells do they expect of me? To heal the wounds inflicted on the Seven Kingdoms dealt by Black Fear. I don't know if I can. But then he calmed when he saw Mother, Grandmother Ulla and Sangza sat on the right of the Iron Throne. Seeing them wait for him, Egon felt reassured in what was expected of him. I can do this. I can do this, he assured himself before he exhaled gently. Egon walked inside the throne room. All hail his grace, Egon, the sixth of his name, King of the Andals, the Rohirrim and the first Amen. Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, and Protector of the realm. Sir Alisa loudly bellowed for all to hear. Silence reigned in the throne room as Egon was sat on the Iron Throne. Sangza smiled at him, giving Egon the calmness he needed. My lords and ladies, friends and family, I thank you all for coming here. To at last celebrate an end to the terrible war that has seen so many thousands die. And make no mistake, these thousands, whether friends, family or loved ones, they died for the selfish ambitions of a brutal sellsword whom wanted only to crown himself king, and not imagine the cost of lives, including his own. But I owe you all thanks, my lords and ladies. For all here played an important part in this war. For those whom I fought alongside at Duskendale, at King's Valley and at the Whispers, I will always be glad to have fought alongside you. And for those whom helped from home, my queen has told me a great deal of the charity and kindness bestowed on the unfortunate refugees whom lost family, homes and livelihoods because of Triss Blackfyr. For these things and more, I wish to convey my eternal gratitude to all gathered here today. He felt a surge of confidence at the nobility clapping and cheering for him. Egon raised his hand for silence. But, before we go any further, I wish to reward those whom showed incredible courage in this war and for their loyalty to the crown in perhaps the most brutal war of our time. Sir Asher of House Forrester, Sir Lucas of House Blackwood and Sir Loras of House Tyrell, please step forth. The three knights stepped forth, including the widely spoken of hero, Asher Forrester. As the handsome northern knight stood in front of the court, scarred from battle, many young ladies swooned at the sight of the handsome slayer of Triss Blackfyr rather than they would have at the famed Knight of Flowers, whom was seemingly ignored. You three fought with great valor and bravery in this war, and by my side. You especially, Sir Lucas and Sir Asher. Sir Lucas, it was your bravery that saved my life on many accounts at Duskendale and at the Whispers. And yet I leave out Sir Asher, whom bravely fought and slew the dreaded Triss Blackfyr and claimed his sword for his own. For your bravery, sirs, I would be proud to anoint you to the King's Guard. Since the killing of Lord Commander Hightower, Egon had appointed Sir Barristan as Lord Commander, an honor he had gladly accepted. The three knights bowed before Egon. Egon rose from the Iron Throne, and Montoris held up Dark Sister, sheathed in its scabbard. He unsheathed Dark Sister and approached the kneeling three knights, going first to Sir Loras, for he knew of how wounded and in pain he was from the wound suffered at the knee by Blackfyr himself. Sir Barristan stood by his side, holding three white cloaks in his hand, as he approached the three knights. Repeat after me these words. I swear to ward the king with all my strength and give my blood for his. I shall take no wife, hold no lands, father no children. I shall guard his secrets, obey his commands, ride at his side and defend his name and honor. The three knights swore the oath, though Egon saw the grimace on Laura's face as he swore the oath. He made a discreet nod to Sir Barristan to hasten the process in view of his pain. Sir Barristan, he was glad to see, understood his meaning. Then, I welcome you to our brotherhood, my brothers. Rise, knights of the King's Guard, and be welcomed by your sworn brothers. He donned the white cloaks on each of them and bid them to rise. They rose from where they knelt and Sir Barristan shook hands with each of them before they were welcomed into their sworn brotherhood by Uncle Lewin, Sir Alisa and Sir Lyle. They stood with the rest of their sworn brothers as they were applauded by the nobility. Egon turned to John Connington and nodded to him. He held up a parchment and read the first on the list of those to be rewarded. Lord Theon of House Greyjoy. The Lord Paramount of the Iron Islands walked towards the Iron Throne, bowing before it and then rising to face Egon. Egon spoke up as John put his parchment down briefly. Lord Greyjoy, when you first came to King's Landing for my coronation, in what feel like many years ago, you swore to me that you wanted to change the Iron Islands and have your people turn from its old way to a new way. And not even I could have seen the impact that you alone, my lord, have had on all of the Seven Kingdoms, with your heroic acts at the Stepstones, at Titan's Tower, before finally crushing the Blackfyr fleet. For this, you have the eternal gratitude of House Targaryen. And as well as my gratitude, I grant House Greyjoy royal consent to award the lordships of the newly recovered islands of Bleak Bay, Deluge, Glenthorne, Greyverge, Saldrock and Seasmoot to whomsoever you think worthy to rule them, as well as awarding lordships to the now landless castles of those whom had betrayed House Greyjoy and the Iron Throne. But also, I would be glad to give royal consent to House Greyjoy to build trading posts across the realm, in thanks to your bravery in fighting all foes of the realm and crushing all those whom would make the realm suffer in the name of profit or something so base as pleasure. Theon Greyjoy bowed and gave his thanks to Aegon whilst all in the throne room either politely clapped for him, whilst others, such as the Martells or the Starks, loudly applauded for him. It is a start. For all their actions, they deserve greater gratitude and recognition for this. But unfortunately, it will be a long time before they are accepted as part of the Seven Kingdoms. The rewards and acknowledgements continued for a few more hours before Aegon dismissed the court, promising a grand feast later in the evening. Aegon was glad to retire for the rest of the day before attending the feast. I'll be glad once this is all over, and I can get some semblance of peace and quiet and they all return home. But, I will be here with Sansa, my queen and my love. And the mother of our soon-to-be-born child. Chapter 54, The Night of Ironrath. Chapter text. Elia 14. Elia walked with Aegon and Baelor to the small council, glad that Aegon was finally happier than he was after returning from the war. She was glad that Sansa had helped him calm down and feel more at peace with himself. But also, she knew that whilst he was troubled by what he had seen and done in the war, she was happy that Triss Blackfyre would not come again. She beamed at seeing Aegon take his seat in the small council. "My sweet darling boy, I am so glad to see you home again," Elia would often inwardly say, such was the joy of Aegon returning safely from the war. She was also glad to see Sir Barristan there, as Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, for though she ignored Gerald Hightower when he was Lord Commander, she was glad that she had made peace with he, Oswell and Arthur before they left. "What has been the news in Essos since the return of the thousands whom served under Blackfyre, Lord Varys?" asked Aegon. "The sellsword companies have begun to reform and try and recruit sellswords before they can take contracts once again, Your Grace. Though I have learned news from my birds-in-laws," he said. "What news?" Elia asked nervously. "Triss Blackfyre's wife, Larissa Rugaria, has given birth to a son, whom she has named Aegon," he replied. "After the death of his father, he may feel inclined to invade Westeros," suggested Jon. "The Blackfyres have failed 6 times in trying to claim the Iron Throne. The closest they came to succeeding was with Triss Blackfyre, but I doubt that the boy will grow up to be like his father," said Baelor. "In any case, we cannot ignore this potential threat," said Jon. "You're not suggesting to murder the babe, Lord Hand?" Aegon asked, horrified. "My children and Daenerys were almost murdered by Tywin Lannister's murderers. I would never sanction nor allow the murder of children to take place. Your Grace, it would save the lives of tens of thousands in the future if the foul and traitor line were to end for good. No, I will not sanction it, nor will I allow any in this room to do so. I will count it as an act of treason should they even think it," Aegon said clearly. Elia smiled at that before turning to Varys. "Lord Varys, can your birds deliver a message to Aerion Rugaria's household?" she asked. "Most certainly, Your Grace," he replied. "Then have them deliver a message to Rugaria himself. I will draft the letter myself. All Rugaria needs is some encouragement, and he will not dare to raise his grandson as a Blackfyre. He may raise him to be a Rugaria. Whatever happens to his grandson, depends entirely on Aerion Rugaria and his daughter." "What of Duskendale and Lord Riker?" asked Sansa. "Lord Riker and his family have returned to Duskendale, my queen. Though it will take a great amount of coin and time to restore the city to what it once was, for it is currently a shadow of what it once was," said Lord Varys. "Surely not," said Baelor. "I'm afraid so. I saw it myself on the march from the Whispers and back home to King's Landing. The city was left in absolute devastation and disrepair. Which is why we shall make a generous donation to Lord Riker that he might repair all damages his city has suffered," said Aegon. "Very good, Aegon," Elia thought proudly. "How much can the royal treasury afford to donate, Sir Baelor?" asked Sansa. "I should think 1,000,000 gold dragons," my queen replied Baelor. "Excellent. See to it that this amount is sent to Lord Riker and that he may begin repairs to his city," Aegon commanded. Of course, your grace. Whilst we are on the subject, what of those lords whose villages and towns were ransacked by the rampaging Dothraki and sellswords of Triss Blackfyr? Asked Elia. I have a full list of those noble houses, your grace, said Varys. And they are? Asked Sir Barristan. Apart from House Riker, they are houses Hogg, Brune, Buckwell, Staunton, Boggs, Crabbe, Hardy and Hollard. Sir Baelor, with Lord Varys and the Grand Maester, estimate the extent of damage suffered by each of the aforementioned houses and have an appropriate amount of coin sent to these houses, that they may recover from what they suffered, said Aegon. Can the royal treasury afford such costs, your grace? Asked the Grand Maester. It can, and it will. Thanks to the efforts of the likes of the Starks for building the Cailin Canal and the Greyjoys for wiping out the pirates of the Stepstones and the raiders and slavers of Titan's Tower, our maritime trade brings plentiful coin for the treasury, said Aegon. Asher 8. Asher walked with Myra, Uncle Georgie, Aunt Tildar, cousins Borros and Davina in the courtyard of the Red Keep. He was dressed in the armor of the Kingsguard, and proudly wearing the white cloak of the Kingsguard. And sheathed at his side was the sword Frostbit, formerly named Blackfyr. The Red Keep's blacksmith, Devan Blyrk, had reforged a handle and pummel for it after removing the old one. He had replaced it with an iron handle shaped like an ironwood tree, the crossguard shaped like branches of a weirwood tree, and the pommel stone was engraved on both sides with the sigil of House Forrester. A fine chapter to add to House Forrester's history, Sir Asher Uncle Georgie complimented with a proud smile. Aye, uncle. It is something that father has refused to stop boasting about, especially to our Whitehill rivals, said Asher. And it is something I shall be boasting about to our own rivals, the damned Stokeworths and Byrchs. In fact, I tell you true, when you were named to the Kingsguard, Asher, Barman Byrch and Tander Stokeworth looked as though they had swallowed some lemons, he replied with glee. Gods, I am sorry I missed that. Cousin, can you teach me how to fight, so I can be as good as you one day? Borros asked excitedly. Of course I can, Borros. Once you reach 10, I'll be glad to teach you to fight as a Kingsguard fights, Asher replied with a smile for his young cousin. Perhaps, one day, Borros, you can be squire for your cousin. Aunt Tildar suggested. Borros' eyes lit up at the mere mention of that. Would you like that, dear boy? Uncle Georgie asked. Yes, father. Can I be your squire, cousin? He asked with greater excitement than when he was asking if he could learn under him. I would be glad to have you as my squire, cousin, said Asher, whilst Myra and Davina were beaming at how adorable Borros was. Asher looked up to the White Sword Tower. Seeing how he looked, Aunt Tildar asked him to stay. Must you go, Asher, dear boy? We were going to have a small feast at Barleyhold that you and your sister can come to, she offered. I would be glad to come, Aunt Tildar, if Lord Commander Selmy permits me. But for now, I have to write my passages in the White Book. Ah, well, don't let us keep you. Let us know when you both can come to Barleyhold. We'll be glad to host you both there, said Uncle Georgie before bidding them farewell. Asher briefly said goodbye to Myra before he walked to the White Sword Tower. Already there was Sir Lyle, resting from guarding Aegon, Sansa and Queen Mother Elia at the small council. And how were your mother's family, Sir Asher? He asked. They were well, thank you, Sir Lyle, he replied before looking at the White Book. Have the final passages for Lord Commander Hightower, Sir Oswell and Sir Arthur been written? He asked. They have. Sir Barristan and Sir Luwin wrote them personally, having known them the longest, replied the Strongbow. Have you not written yours yet? Asked Sir Lyle. I have not, no, I just don't know how I would write my first passage, he replied. Sir Lyle sat up from his bed. Ah, just do what I did when I was in your position many years ago. Look at how other knights before you wrote their own passages. Describe in detail, but not too much detail, what battles you have fought and, in your case, describe your duel with Blackfyr. Asher sat down at the table and took the quill and ink pot already sat there and opened the White Book. At the newest entries, he had seen that whilst he and Lucas had yet to write their entries in, Sir Loras had already written his. He has gone into great detail his jousting victories as the Knight of Flowers, and talked of his deeds at Duskendale, King's Valley and the Whispers. That was quick. Didn't take him long at all. Mind you, the same could be said for how long he lasted against Blackfyr himself, Asher thought with a grin before he began writing his name on a new page of the White Book. Sir Asher of House Forrester of Ironrath. Born the first day of the new year of 283 AC. Born to Lord Gregor of House Forrester of Ironrath and Lady Elissa of House Bramfield of Barleyhold. Joined the King's Guard at 17 in 300 AC, in the first year of the reign of His Grace, King Egon, the sixth of his name. Was knighted by His Grace King Egon after fighting alongside Sir Lyle Crickehall the Strongbow, Sir Aliza Thorne and Sir Lucas Blackwood against the notorious bandits known as the Bloodborne Brotherhood at Southhorn. In the War of the Two Dragons, fought alongside His Grace with the King's Guard at the Battle of Duskendale, the Battle of King's Valley and the Battle of the Whispers. At the Battle of the Whispers, after witnessing the killing of Sir Arthur Dane at the hands of Tris Blackfear, fought Blackfear personally with sword and axe against his sword, the Valyrian steel bastard sword Blackfear. Slew Tris Blackfear with his own sword before taking the sword Blackfear for his own and renaming it Frostbite and for it to become the family ancestral weapon of House Forrester. Was named to the King's Guard by His Grace soon after the war's end in the Red Keep, by the King himself and by Lord Commander, Sir Barristan Selmy. Chapter 55, An Equal Kingdom. Chapter Text. Catelyn 8. Maester Lewin read the letter to Catelyn as she and Jane were playing with Brandon and Gwyn in the nursery. They had taken it upon themselves to entertain Catelyn's grandchildren before old Nan would come to them and read them stories and tales of the North. Until Maester Lewin joined them with a letter from Bran. Cat, my love. I write with joy that the war is finally over. You will have heard of the great battle of King's Valley, but what you won't have heard is that it was Robb whom planned the battle, just as it was Robb whom planned the great battle of the Whispers, where we defeated the Blackfear army once and for all. The battle was won when it was Robb whom led a force of infantry of Carhold and Bear Island on a goat path to smash them from their flanks, and Blackfear himself was slain by brave Sir Asher Forrester. By the time you receive this, we shall be making our way home to Winterfell after what has been a long and hard war, one which I pray will be my last. We briefly saw Sansa in the capital. She is well, I am glad to say. But she is a moon, if not less, away from giving birth. I long to see you soon. Cat my love. Yours sincerely. Bran. The war is finally over. Thank the gods. Jane and Catelyn excitedly hugged at the news before Jane started telling Brandon and Gwyn and about their heroic father. And thank the gods that Sansa is well. Catelyn left Jane and her children as old Nan arrived, for the two wanted to stay and continue playing with Brandon and Gwyn. Catelyn walked to Bran's solar and pondered whether or not she should travel to King's Landing, to see Sansa. No, I shall wait until Bran, Robb and Arya have returned home. Then we will discuss going to King's Landing as a family to see Sansa. With the war over and the Blackfear threat gone, Catelyn sat down as she reflected on all that happened since she, Bran and their children had left for King's Landing for Aegon's coronation. The Caelin Canal had been completed. Sansa had wed him and been crowned queen. Robb had wed and was now a father of two beautiful children. Alaric, Byrne and Rickon had become lords of Moat Cailin, Wolf's Den and Snowhelm, forming their own houses. House Stark has accomplished so much since Bran and I came to Winterfell after the end of the rebellion. All things for the better. House Stark has become stronger, wealthier and more powerful. And never again will the North be looked down on by the kingdoms of the South as a land of savages and barbarians. Theon 13. Theon sighed with contentment as he relaxed in his chair in his solar. By the drowned god, it is good to be back home, Theon thought as he closed his eyes briefly. Only for the door to open. Missandei entered, her belly heavy with their child. Theon stood up, beaming at seeing her. How are you? She asked as they embraced. Glad to be back home. But it is me that should be asking you that question, my love. Are you well? I am. Maester Wendermer has been taking good care of me. He said another 2 moons and I shall give birth, she replied as she sat next to him and held his hand, and Theon kissed her neck. Theon picked her hand to his lips and kissed it before kissing her on the lips. 2 more moons, and I will be a father. The door opened again, this time it was Maester Wendermer, Mother, Uncle Roderick and Asher. You might think to save that shit for later when you're in bed, said Asher. I would be doing it with my wife, sister, whilst you'll never marry. And why would I want to be another man's rock wife or a lady when I am Lady Captain of the Iron Fleet and have all that I could ever want aboard the Black Wind and home here in Pike, she wondered before they sat down at his desk. "How have the Bannermen been since our return home, uncle?" asked Theon. "With the death of the Crozai and all whom supported him, it's really driven home for all of them that the old way is gone and that the new way is the only way to follow," he replied. "And rightly so. Such idiots would only bring us down." "Those houses which supported him, which are they?" asked Mother. "Cod, Ironmaker, Awkward and Wynch," said Uncle Roderick. "All of the men are dead now, especially the Cods, which aren't a loss to the world or to the Iron Islands," Asha commented with pride, for she hated both the Cods and Ironmakers to the extent that she killed both Ergen Cod and Eric Ironmaker at the Battle of the Whispering Bay. "Ah, my heart may just bleed at the destruction of the Cods," Theon thought sarcastically. "All the men." "What of the women?" asked Theon. "Just one awkward girl," replied Asha. "Well, we can find a good man to wed her and their children can be awkward," said Theon. "What of the others?" "Coral Outlook, Ironholt and Red Forge all lack in noble families ruling them, as well as our new islands," said Uncle Roderick. Theon and Asha shared a nod. "Asha and I discussed this already, Uncle. Cousin Dagon can wed the awkward girl. As for whom becomes lords, I have thought to name those among the Iron Fleet whom are loyal and capable captains," said Theon. "Such as?" asked Mother. "Newt the Barber. Tom Tidewood. Black Lauren. Cousin Quinton. Alaydale the Alehouse. Dana Pike. Torrigan Eaglehelm. Vicken the Mutton Hammer. And Emond Axehand," said Theon. He turned to Maester Wendomer. "I'll need letters sent to them and for them to be informed that they are to come to Pike." "Yes, my lord." "These captains, will they follow the new way?" asked Missandei. "Aye, they will, my dear. It's clear to all of the Iron Islands that following the old way will only lead to failure and death and no man wants to die in an inglorious defeat," wisely said Uncle Roderick. "What of the trading posts? I know that the king gave us leave to build new ones, but is that enough? Are we permitted to build them anywhere else?" asked Asha. Theon turned to Uncle Roderick. I spoke with the hand of the king before we left and he agreed to permit me to speak with the other lords paramount before agreeing to allow us to build them in the Crown lands. Brandon Stark, Hoster Tully and Elbereth Arryn have agreed to trading posts being built when I spoke with them. Soon, we can expand our trade in the north, the Riverlands, the Vale and the Crown lands. Why not the rest of Westeros? Surely after the king all but thanked us on bended knee for all we did, that they would want to thank us?" Asha demanded. "You would think that, but they are still fucking idiots whom think us to be pirates and reavers. Once we have built trading posts in the Crown lands, the North, the Riverlands and the Vale, then we will focus on expanding into the Westerlands and the Reach," said Theon. "It'll take a long time before the Tyrells agree. Paxter Redwyne is Mace Tyrell's good brother and he won't have forgotten us not giving him the command and you battering his cousin's pretty face in," said Uncle Roderick with a chuckle. "Did you really do that, Theon?" asked Mother. "Oh, I did, Mother," Theon replied. "Did a good job of it too, Mother." "He was asking for it," Asha commented with a grin before she sipped from her tankard. "And it felt so fucking good afterwards." "What about the Lannisters?" asked Mother. "Tywin Lannister should agree. His nephew Davin was a decent bloke when we fought alongside him, I thought," said Asha. "True, but would Tywin agree to trading posts in the Westerlands, Uncle?" asked Theon. "History between our countries aside, I think so. Whilst he is a ruthless man, he is also pragmatic. But, revealingly, from what my friends in Lannisport have told me, all of the gold and silver mines of the Westerlands have run dry for 3 years in a row." "What? The Lannisters have none of their precious gold left to buy men's loyalties. What a fucking jape those high and mighty lions are. Run dry. Fuck that shit," Asha muttered. "If they are run dry, then Tywin will want to use our trading posts to make extra coin to hold on to what dignity he has left now that all the kingdoms will know this as well as us," said Theon. "Exactly. The old lion of Casterly Rock may have a brutal reputation, but like with any man, reputation is everything and he will always deny that there is no gold left to be mined. So long as we can negotiate from the point of pretending to not know and insist that this is a deal from which we can all benefit from, then we will have a strong base to build our trading posts," Uncle Roderick explained. Chapter 56, The Crown Prince. Chapter text. Brandon 11. Gods, it is good to be back home, Brandon thought as the gates of the Winter City opened for he, Robb, Arya and the army of Winterfell. Brandon was glad to smell the familiar scents of Winterfell as they rode through the Winter City, where the small folk cheered their arrival. After crossing through Moat Cailin, the bannermen of the north went their desperate ways to reach their homes. And Brandon, Robb and Arya had ridden with the army of Winterfell to reach home. As they had marched on the road for Winterfell, Brandon compared this journey home to the journey home made with Cat and Robb soon after the rebellion's end. That journey was much slower with the shit roads the Targaryens had built for us centuries ago and did not think to build better for us. But now, the north is a far greater place to be proud to call home. And no southerner can take that pride away from us, no matter how much sunlight shines on their castles, no matter how much gold can be found in their treasuries and no matter how much influence they try and milk out in court. As he rode towards the gates to the great keep of Winterfell, Brandon felt proud of all he and Cat had accomplished since coming to Winterfell as Lord and Lady. The war with the Black Fires has ended. The future of the North looks promising with all we have built. And Sansa truly is happy with her husband, and shall soon give birth to our future king. Brandon smiled as the gates opened and there, waiting for them at the doors to the great keep, were Cat, Jane, Lysara, Bran and Quinn. Jane held on to the tiny hands of her son and daughter. Wasting no time, Robb jumped down from his horse and ran up to Jane, hugging and kissing her before picking up Bran and Quinn. Brandon smiled at his son before climbing down and hugging Cat. "Gods, I've missed you, Cat," he whispered as he buried his face in her sweet-smelling hair. "And I have missed you, Bran," she said as she stroked his long hair. As Bran broke from the hug, he held Cat's hands. "How was Sansa?" she asked. "She was well. Only a few weeks now, before she gives birth," Brandon replied. Brandon turned to his grandson and granddaughter, both of whom were giggling at silly faces being pulled by Robb. Brandon approached, smirking at what Robb was doing. "And what are you doing to my beautiful and innocent grandchildren?" he asked. "I'm just so happy to see my children," Father Robb replied before hugging them both again and holding Jane's hand and kissing it before the four walked inside Winterfell. Brandon walked to his solo with Cat and he sighed heavily as he sat down on his chair. "Gods, it is good to be back home," Brandon thought as he stretched his legs and arms out and yawned. "I don't know if you have heard the news from your father or your brother," asked Brandon. "No, heard what?" "Is Lysara all right?" asked Cat. "Aye, she is. Fear not, Cat. For it's nothing to do with Lysara or your father. But it is to do with our beloved nephew Tristan, whom is to wed soon. To Myrcella Lannister." "I see. And when will the wedding be?" asked Cat. "A moon from now. We can down to Riverrun for the wedding on our way home from King's Landing after Sansa has given birth," Brandon replied. "You planned this already?" Cat said. I did. And Arya can be trusted to run Winterfell until our return, with Maester Lewin's help, of course," said Brandon. They chuckled at that before there was a knock on the door. "Enter." Robb and Jane entered, holding hands. "And how are your children, Jane?" "Just started learning to walk and speak," she replied. "Anything interesting they say?" asked Brandon. "Gibberish currently, but to me, it is heavenly." "Cat said the same thing about their father," said Brandon. Lucas 8. The first Blackwood to be a Knight of the Kingsguard, Lucas thought with pride as he finished reading his complete passages in the White Book. "Have you been spinning your own fantasies about your deeds in the White Book, Lucas?" Lucas chuckled as he turned around to Asher, whom was lying down on his bed. "Spinning my own fantasies? Oh, that I was doing my duty of protecting the king rather than chasing off after my own glory?" Lucas asked. "And killing Blackfyr, whom was hellbent on murdering the king, that wasn't protecting the king?" Asher argued. Lucas chuckled before standing up from the desk. "No, I was just letting the ink dry and reading what I wrote," he explained. "Did you follow Sir Lyle's advice on what to write and how to write it?" asked Asher. I did. And I was reading the passages of our fallen sworn brothers," he added. "For so many years they had dedicated their lives to defending their kings. I only hope my years will be long and peaceful in the Kingsguard." Lucas stretched his arms out before walking to the door. "I thought you had done your duties for the day." Asher wondered. "I have. I am just going to the Godswood to give thanks to the gods for how they have guided my life so far and that I am now in the Kingsguard, Lucas explained. Ah, well, give the gods some thanks on my behalf whilst you're there, Asher called before putting his war trophy to one side and yawning as he began to rest. He chuckled as he left the White Sword Tower and walked towards the Godswood. Passing through the Red Keep's gardens, he saw Ladies Jane Poole and Myra Forrester walking to the Godswood. Is the Queen with them? Considering she is of the north and worships the old gods, I should think it proper that she would do that. Sure enough, Lucas found himself at the beautiful heart tree in the Godswood, and seated on a log beneath its roots, were the Queen and her two northern ladies in waiting. Should she be doing this, in view of how late in her gestation she is, Lucas anxiously thought before sitting down. Oh, good day, Sir Lucas, said the Queen. Good day, my Queen. My ladies, Lucas replied before bowing his head. You do not come here accompanied, Your Grace? Lucas asked. No, sir. I wanted some peace and quiet before retiring to my chambers for the day, she replied. Of course, my Queen, he replied with a bow of his head. But before Lucas could make any prayer to the gods, his eyes turned to the Queen when he heard her groan in pain. Your Grace, he said, standing up instantly and running to her side. The Queen panted as she tried to stand up, but she was sore in pain as she reached for her belly. The Queen is to give birth. My ladies, get to the Grand Maester and have him ready to deliver the baby. I'll take the Queen there, said Lucas before holding both the Queen's hands. Though at first standing in shock, both did as they were told and quickly ran from the Queen's side and back to the Red Keep. Come this way, Your Grace, Lucas said gently before helping her stand up. I cannot. I can't, she said, gasping for breath and pleading to stop. We must get you to the Grand Maester, my Queen, was all Lucas could say before he picked her up with both hands. As gently as he could, Lucas ran to the Grand Maester's pillow in the rookery. Running there, he saw Lady Forrester holding the doors open for him. Thank you, my lady, he quickly said before running inside. Lucas ran inside, whilst the Queen was weeping as she groaned in pain. Lay her down on the table, said the Grand Maester. Lucas lay her down whilst the Grand Maester began ordering his apprentices around to fetch towels and water. It would be best if you leave, said the Grand Maester. We will be outside, my Queen, Lucas said before leaving with both Lady Forrester and Lady Poole. As he closed the doors behind him, Lucas grimaced at hearing the shouts of pain. It reminded him of when Mother gave birth to Edmund, Alan, Bethany and Robert. I should be with her, angrily said Lady Poole. You won't be any help to her, my lady. This is all in the hands of the Grand Maester and the gods, he said. It felt agonizing for Lucas to wait outside, listening to the Queen's screams and not being able to do a thing about it. He couldn't imagine what it felt like for the Queen or for Lady Poole when the Queen was her childhood friend. Lucas anxiously stood by the door whilst Lady Forrester looked beyond towards the Great Hall. Should I inform the King? He would want to be here, said Lady Forrester. I will go, said Lady Poole. But before Lucas could say anything, he listened to the screams behind the door. They had stopped. My ladies, listen. It's stopped. They hushed and listened. Lucas opened the door and looked inside to see the Queen gasping for breath as she was helped to sit up by one of the Grand Maester's apprentices. The Grand Maester meanwhile was closely examining a weeping babe whilst wiping it with a towel. The two ladies in waiting immediately ran to the Queen's side. As the Queen hugged both her friends, she turned to the Grand Maester. Grand Maester, the child. Is it well? He asked. He is. My Queen, you have a handsome and healthy little boy, he said before passing the boy to the Queen. I must tell the King. Egon 11. Egon walked with Baylor Hightower and John Connington in the Tower of the Hand discussing the state of the royal treasury. But the crown is not in debt to anyone. Least of all, Tywin Lannister or Mace Tyrell, asked Egon. The crown does not owe a single coin to anyone, my king, said Baylor Hightower. As much as either of them would have been too glad, in their own way, to lend coin to the crown, your grace, we made sure to do no such thing, added John. Not even after the charity given to the various noble families whom suffered the most in the war, asked Egon. Baylor Hightower looked down at a parchment. In total, a sum of 1,400,000 gold dragons has been gifted by the royal treasury to the aforementioned houses, your grace. which was only a third of the coin in the royal treasury after the necessary war expenditure had been paid, said the master of coin. Egon nodded, glad that the Iron Throne was in no way bankrupt, nor owed money to anyone. This is excellent. Then all shall be well in the realm once work begins to rebuild what was lost in the war. And, God's willing, there might finally be a lasting peace in my reign, and with no conflicts simmering. The Seven Kingdoms have suffered enough because of lords and ladies playing the Game of Thrones. Your Grace. Egon, Baylor, John and Sir Alisa turned to see Lucas running breathlessly towards them. Sir Lucas, catch your breath, boy, sternly said Sir Alisa as he almost reached them. Yes, sir, he said before panting briefly. Your Grace, the Queen has given birth. What? She has? Is she well? Egon asked fearfully. She is, my king. The Grand Maester is taking care of her in his solar and is caring for the Crown Prince, he replied. Crown Prince? It is a son, Sir Lucas, asked John. Aye, a healthy son, Lord Hand. My congratulations, Your Grace, warmly said the Hand of the King. Egon, Lucas and Sir Alisa ran together to the Grand Maester's chambers, where Egon saw Sansa sat down, and holding a cooing baby in her arms. Egon stared breathlessly at the baby she held. My son. No. Our son. Look, it's your father, sweetly said Sansa before she passed the boy to Egon. Gently, Egon held their son, wrapped in towels, frightened to hold on to him too tightly. You are the most precious little boy in the world, Egon thought as he stared at his son's weary lavender-colored eyes. Tenderly he reached down and kissed his son's forehead. My congratulations, my king and queen, said the Grand Maester. Have you chosen a name, Your Grace? Asked Lucas. We have. This is Crown Prince Aemon Targaryen, Egon replied proudly. Egon held hands with Sansa as he closely held Aemon and then leant in to kiss Sansa's sweet lips. Sir Alisa, tell my mother and grandmother that we will be in Maegor's Hold fast, Egon said. At once, my king. Chapter 57, History 2. Chapter Text. History 2. An excerpt from A War of Two Dragons by Archmaester Baylor. In the beginning of the reign of King Egon, the sixth of his name, any thinking that his reign would be a peaceful one, were soon dispelled, when a rude awakening came upon the great houses of the Seven Kingdoms. For only half a year after the royal wedding of King Egon and Queen Sansa, King Egon received a threatening letter from a man whom many thought didn't exist, until he became captain of the infamous Golden Company. His name? Trys Blackfyr. When he was first crowned king, King Egon had made it his duty to ensure that all of the realm was united behind the Iron Throne, to prevent the catastrophes of war and to make amends for the mistakes of his father and his grandfather. He accomplished this, by marrying his sister, Princess Rhaenys, to Willers Tyrell, heir to Highgarden, and his aunt, Princess Daenerys, to Fortis Baratheon, heir to Storm's End. And at his coronation, the young king became besotted with the fair Lady Sansa of House Stark. After accepting a proposal from her parents, Lord Brandon Stark and Lady Catelyn Tully, King Egon proudly announced his intentions to wed the young lady at the final feast of the coronation celebrations. By coincidence, at the coronation was a man whom can only be described as a great man. This great man, young like the king, was Lord Theon of House Greyjoy. Raised by his uncle Roderick Harlaw, Lord of Ten Towers, in the aftermath of the Clash of Crookhans, Theon Greyjoy was taught to believe in a new way for the Ironborn to follow as opposed to the old way, which followed a barbaric way of life that taught the people of the Iron Islands to raid, steal and kill. Theon Greyjoy hoped to show the people of the Seven Kingdoms, including his king, that his intentions were honorable and that he did not want to follow in the example set by his father, Balon Greyjoy. The king believed the young Lord Greyjoy and tasked him and the mighty Iron Fleet with dealing with persistent threats that were affecting Westeros. They were the notorious pirates of the Stepstones and the nefarious Sisterman Sea Raiders and Tiroshi slavers of Titan's Tower. Keen to prove himself to the king, Theon Greyjoy succeeded in both these tasks, conquering the Stepstones on behalf of Dorne and liberating the lands of the Fingers of the Vale from the Sea Raiders and slavers whom made it a home and a raiding base. As well as gold, House Greyjoy was granted royal consent to build trading posts in Dorne, the Vale, the North and the Riverlands. But across the narrow sea, Trys Blackfyr, the grandson of Daemon Blackfyr, the very same Golden Company whom had been murdered by Maelys the Monstrous, took command of the Golden Company and began to take high-paying contracts from his home of the free cities of Lys and Volantis, as well as Valyrian warlords hoping to carve their own kingdoms as Aegon the Conqueror once did. He conquered the lands of Long Summer for the reigning king Vigor Galenios and the cities of Slavers Bay, now the kingdom of Basilisk Bay, for the reigning king Jaeharevar Linaron. Though a ruthless and brutal man, his skill as a general was undeniably brilliant. And he was famed as one of the greatest warriors in the known world, having enhanced his skill from years of fighting in the Golden Company and fighting in the fighting pits of Astapa and Meereen. Earning a great wealth in millions of gold pieces, Tris Blackfyr enhanced his reputation as a warrior and as a leader on the battlefield. And, with his many victories and his vast wealth, he had no trouble bringing more sellswords and warriors to his army. It wasn't long before his army included a horde of Dothraki, a legion of Unsullied and the mightiest sellsword armies of Essos. But it was when he was fighting in Slavers Bay for Jaeharevar Linaron that he met perhaps the most dangerous and notorious fugitive in Westeros history, Euron the Crow's Eye of House Greyjoy. Commanding a fleet of pirates and Ironborn reavers, whom deserted Theon Greyjoy's reforms in favor of a life of murder and plunder, Euron Greyjoy commanded a fleet of 250 ships, which joined with Tris Blackfyr's army of 75,000 men. Returning to his birthplace of Lys, Blackfyr made a marriage alliance with House Rugaria of Lys, marrying the daughter of Magister Aerion Rugaria, Lady Larissa. He now gained a small army of sellswords of House Rugaria and their fleet of 50 sails. Tris Blackfyr, now brimming with confidence in his armies and his fleets, began his plans to invade Westeros. Invading Westeros at Cracklaw Point, Tris Blackfyr's rampaging Dothraki and sellswords raided and pillaged their way across the peninsula before they marched to fight the combined armies of the Crown Lands, the Reach and the Westerlands, whilst the Iron Fleet sailed for the Vale to crush the Blackfyr fleet, and where Theon Greyjoy and his sister, Lady Asha, Lady Captain of the Iron Fleet, hoped to avenge their family so foully murdered by the Crow's Eye. But at the Battle of Duskendale, the armies of the Iron Throne were defeated by a surprise attack by Blackfyr's army. This defeat cost the lives of over 30,000 men, whom took up arms to fight for their king and in defense of their country against foreign invaders. However, what followed afterwards was a terror beyond imagining. Only a few hours after routing King Aegon's army, Blackfyr and Euron Greyjoy took the city of Duskendale in a surprise attack. But rather than spare the city, they brutally sacked the city, slaughtering over 50,000 innocent small folk and burning the city. Though brave Lord Renfred Ryker managed to escape with his family and as many of his people as he couldn't save them all. But whilst all balked at the terrible fate of Duskendale, its tale became a rallying cry for all loyal men of the king, whom took up arms against the foul Blackfyr terror. King Aegon and the remnants of his army joined with the combined armies of the north, the Riverlands and the Vale at Castle Deari. And it was as they planned, that the king's good brother, Robb, heir to Winterfell, told the king and his war council of a genius plan. The plan was to lure Blackfyr towards them with the help of the approaching armies of Dorne and the Stormlands, at a place in the borders of the Riverlands and the Crown Lands, called King's Valley. Though the place is now called Blackfyr Valley, so named, for it was there that the tide of the war turned and the Blackfyr army was defeated. Less than 30,000 Blackfyr soldiers died that bloody day at Blackfyr Valley before they fled back to Duskendale. Recovering at Southhorn, the king led his combined armies to chase after Blackfyr, suspecting that a man of his reputation would rather die than embrace defeat or try and escape. Indeed, some feared that in revenge, Blackfyr would return to the Whispers and sail for King's Landing and repeat to the capital what his army had done to Duskendale. But soon after arriving at the Whispers to resupply and fortify for a final battle, brave Theon Greyjoy led the Iron Fleet and the combined fleets of Houses Hightower, Lannister and Redwyne, whom followed his command, for in spite of his youth, he was the most experienced at fighting at sea. At the Battle of the Whispering Bay, Theon Greyjoy led a successful attack on his kinslaying uncle's fleet, crushing it before he boarded the dreaded ship of his uncle, the Silence, so called for the Crow's Eye had ripped the tongues out of all the crew. Wielding his battle trophy from killing a pirate captain, a Valyrian steel sword he named Unrelenting, Theon Greyjoy killed his way to get to Euron the Crow's Eye, whom laughed as he taunted his nephew. Angered by his admission of how he unrepentantly murdered his brothers, his father and his uncles, Theon Greyjoy duelled him, only to discover that his uncle wore Valyrian steel armor and fought with an axe and dagger of Valyrian steel. Undeterred, the Lord of the Iron Islands cut at the noticeable weak points of his armor, namely his heel and his elbow. Though his elbow and heel were badly wounded, the evil crow's eye laughed at his nephew, before his foul tongue was silenced forever by Theon's surviving uncle Roderick Harlaw, whom drowned him for the murder of his sister's children. Infuriated by the loss of his fleet, Tris Blackfyr prepared for what would not only be a fight for survival, but a fight to determine the ruling dynasty of the Seven Kingdoms. The Battle of the Whispers was a terrible battle, and the day ended with the deaths of a combined total of 35,000 men. The battle was won when brave Robb Stark spotted a weakness in the Blackfyr flanks and a goat path that led one to it, so he led a force of infantry of houses Karstark and Mormont to strike. Robb Stark's bold plan was successful and it smashed into the Blackfyr rear. Tris Blackfyr, angered by his army being flanked, spotted his enemy, King Aegon, fighting on the front lines with his Kingsguards, Lord Commander Gerald Hightower, Sir Arthur Dayne, Sir Oswell Went, Sir Lylcra Kehall and Sir Alisa Thorne, as well as two household knights, Sir Lucas Blackwood and Sir Asher Forrester. Blackfyr, in a desperate attempt to claim victory, charged at the king, slaying many brave knights and soldiers in his path towards the king. He slew brave Sir Arthur before his path was blocked by courageous Sir Asher. The Northern Knight duelled tirelessly against the man hellbent on murdering his king before he cut off the head of Sir Asher's axe. Taking his sword and the grip of his broken axe, Sir Asher stabbed him in the arm with the splintered grip before stabbing him in the throat with his sword. Brave Sir Asher ended the war with the slaying of Tris Blackfyr. The royal armies returned to King's Landing, where the king anointed Sir Asher Forrester, Sir Lucas Blackwood and Sir Loras Tyrell into the Kingsguard. And he further rewarded Theon Greyjoy by granting him royal consent to further build trading posts across Westeros and to freely award lordships to whomsoever he wished. But greater news for the realm came at the birth of the Crown Prince, Aemon Targaryen. Chapter 58, Epilogue. Chapter Text. Epilogue, Holiday Granger as Lucrezia Borgia in the Borgias, 2011 to 2013, Dizzy Red and Gold Dress Costume by Gabriella Pescacci. #period drama #Queen Borgias #drama #dresses #fashion #style #series #serie #miniseries #television #the Borgias #Borgia #Borgias. Chilla Lannister, Holiday Granger. Gods, why am I so nervous? Chilla wiped the sweat forming on her brow with the lady's favor she had once made to gift Loron on his first tourney but couldn't when Uncle Tyrion had gotten him so drunk that he couldn't even climb onto his horse without giggling hysterically and stumbling onto the ground. She now kept it as her lucky charm for when she was nervous. "You'll be fine," Sister Loron assured her. "That's easy for you to say, you aren't about to wed the Crown Prince," Chilla replied as she anxiously scratched an itch on the back of her neck. Father held her hand and beamed at her proudly. "You'll be fine, Chilla, I promise," he said. "Thank you, Father," she replied. Father always had a comforting voice which he used for Chilla and it helped calm her down whenever she was up nervous or unhappy about something. Chilla held on to Father's hand as they walked together from their quarters in the Maiden Vault and to the courtyard of the Red Keep. Where already awaiting them was a wheelhouse. "And how is the future Crown Princess?" Uncle Tyrion asked as he joined them. "Cheered up by your ever-joyful and amusing company, Uncle," she replied. Uncle Tyrion beamed as he walked with them to the wheelhouse. "Your Aunt Cersei was actually drawing a wheelhouse decorated with Lannister lions and Targaryen dragons growing up, when she was still dreaming of becoming a queen. The day she was refused was one of the funniest in my life," Uncle Tyrion recounted to Chilla and Loron's amusement. "That sounds like Aunt Cersei. The world revolves around her and how important she is to House Lannister and House Lannister's legacy," Chilla thought as she remembered Aunt Cersei trying to involve herself in talks between Chilla, Father, Uncle Tyrion and Grandfather Tywin about being wed to Crown Prince Aemon. The match had been made on a royal visit the king and queen were making to Casterly Rock. Ever since the birth of Crown Prince Aemon, the royal family would make royal visits to one of the kingdoms and meet the Lord Paramount's family. The year before had been to Pike. And then when they visited Casterly Rock, Chilla had fallen in love with the handsome and quiet Crown Prince, who eagerly courted her around Lannisport and Casterly Rock. And soon after a welcoming tourney, on the final day of their visit, Aemon had gone to both Father and Grandfather Tywin and asked their consent to wed Chilla. Uncle Tyrion had told her, "It was the first time I had ever seen your grandfather smile in many, many years." "I should think so. He has been obsessed about having Lannister blood on the Iron Throne since Father and Aunt Cersei were born." Recently, since the preparations for the royal wedding were underway, Chilla couldn't see Aemon, for he was in Winterfell to attend the wedding of his cousin, Brandon, the second in line to Winterfell, after his father Robb. After seeing his cousin wed Aelys Ryswell, Aemon returned to King's Landing, where the two courted and he gladly showed her around the Red Keep. Chilla loved courting with Aemon around King's Landing and seeing the great sights of the Great September of Baelor and the top of the walls of the Red Keep. Chilla had a particular fondness for seeing great landmarks of the world and reading about them. Which was why Uncle Tyrion had often gifted her books on landmarks and wonders of the world by Lomas Longstrider on previous name-a-days. But now, on the day of the wedding itself, Chilla was nervous as she could listen to the sounds of the cheering small folk outside of the wheelhouse. "Why do they cheer for me? I haven't done anything for them." "Father, why do they cheer?" asked Chilla. "They cheer for their future queen," the beautiful Chilla Lannister mother said before stroking Chilla's cheek. "Just think, Chilla. You are doing something that neither your mother nor your Aunt Cersei could do. Marrying a crown prince," said Uncle Tyrion. "That's not helping," Chilla thought as she held on to her favor and mouthed the word luck at it. "This is our stop," said Loron. Chilla looked out of the wheelhouse window to see them halt. Father was the first to climb out of the wheelhouse. He helped Mother out first before holding Chilla's hand as she climbed down from the wheelhouse. Father escorted her up the steps of the Great September of Baelor, past throngs of cheering and applauding small folk. Together, Chilla, Father, Mother, Loron and Uncle Tyrion walked up the steps, where at the top, 2 Kingsguard knights were waiting for them. She recognized Uncle Loras. And she recognized the other as Sir Asher Forrester, whom was Loron's favorite hero growing up and would often play with his friends pretending to be him fighting Triss Blackfyr. Looking up at the altar, Aemon was already stood there, just in front of the High Septon, whom smiled warmly at Aemon and Chilla both. Father beamed at Chilla before she walked to Aemon's side and held his hands. "Gods, he is so handsome. I just want to kiss him and go to bed with him right now." Aemon was a very handsome young man, but it was not simply his good looks which drew Chilla to him in the first place. His eyes were large and doe-like, just like Queen Sansa, and they lit up when he talked to her and it made her feel as though she was the most fortunate girl in the world. His smile was kind and inviting, which made Chilla feel at ease around him. But what Chilla enjoyed the most about him was how caring he was to everyone around him, from servants to Kingsguard, to nobles and to his brother, Sir Jaehaerys or his sisters, Princesses Valeera and Elyara, whom were soon to wed Roderick Greyjoy and Artis Arryn respectively. She beamed at Aemon when she saw him smile at her. "That smile just makes me fall in love with him even more," she thought. The High Septon waited until the two held hands before he began his speech. "Deep breaths, remember. You've rehearsed this plenty of times with Mother." Father joined Mother, Loron, Uncle Tyrion, Grandfather Tywine, Aunt Cersei, Uncle Davin and Cousin Tommen at the front row of their side in the September. As Aemon took Chilla's hands, the High Septon began. "You are so beautiful today, Chilla," he whispered. "You don't look so bad yourself," she replied, at which he blushed. "I've dreamt of this day for moons and nearly an entire year. And now we are finally here. Aemon and I. You may bring the bride under your protection," said the High Septon. Aemon reached behind and he unfastened his cloak, embroidered with the sigil and colors of House Targaryen, and gently took off Chilla's Lannister-colored cloak and placed it aside and wrapped his Targaryen cloak around her, with a loving smile on his face. "Gods, I do love that smile. My king, my queen, my lords and ladies. We stand here in the sight of gods and men to witness the union of husband and wife. One flesh, one heart, one soul, now and forever." Aemon and Chilla still held each other's hands, and then the High Septon tied a ribbon around their holding hands and said, "Let it be known that Aemon Targaryen and Chilla Lannister are one heart, one flesh, one soul. Cursed be he who would seek to tear them asunder." Just by holding his hands, Chilla felt happier and safer, as she always did whenever she was in his presence. But what mattered to her the most was that he was by her side in front of all nobility of all kingdoms of the realm, from Queen Sansa's homeland of the north to Queen Dowager Elya's homeland of Dorne. And as he untied and unraveled the ribbon, the High Septon announced to all in attendance in the sight of the seven, "I hereby seal these two souls, binding them as one for eternity." He turned to Chilla and Aemon. "Look upon each other and say the words. Don't panic, Chilla. You've gone through this so many times with Mother. Father, smith, warrior, mother, maiden, crone, stranger, they said together. Aemon said, I am hers and she is mine. From this day, until the end of my days. I am his and he is mine. From this day, until the end of my days, said Chila. With this kiss, I pledge my love, said Aemon. And he leant in and kissed Chila. Gods, I love feeling his lips on my lips, Chila thought as they held their kiss together. I would kiss him forever right here and now if I could. Chila felt her heart beat really fast when they broke from the kiss and they smiled at her. Chila couldn't help but smile as he smiled her, and they faced the guests as they clapped for them and walked down the aisle. But as they walked down the aisle together, Chila couldn't help but overhear the jealous ladies of the realm, and see their angry glares. From the Arryns, Tullys and from the Tyrells. She could even see a jealous glare from Aunt Cersei. Just ignore them, Chila. Grow up, for God's sake, Aunt Cersei. Today is all about me and Aemon, she thought as they walked to the entrance together, where they waved at the small folk together. Chila held on to Aemon's hand before stroking it. I love you, Aemon. He turned to her and beamed at her before leaning in to kiss her. And I love you, Chila Targaryen. Chila Targaryen. Yes, I am, she thought happily. The end.